So I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Recreation and Park District. Tonight we have Sammy Edgar to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Sammy, before you do that, one of the reasons I selected you tonight is you have a strong mind for civic engagement and volunteerism. And you earned your Eagle Scout, as I understand, for doing a project at a local temple or Jewish community center. Can you tell us
Yeah, it's a synagogue preschool.
And what did you do?
So they had a playground that was really disheveled, and I renovated it. I painted flower boxes, and I made some tile hopscotch games.
Well, thank you for that. Sammy, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. Do we have a flag?
So we have flags all over the place. So aim yourself towards a flag.
All right. Please stand. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Sammy, will you call the roll, Gina?
Yes. Director Abela?
Here.
Director Freeman?
Here.
Director Gray?
Here.
Vice Chair O'Brien?
We're on mute.
Vice Chair O'Brien? Vice Chair O'Brien? Kate?
I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Chair, yes, now. Chair Dennert?
Here. District Manager, are there any items for agenda review?
Chair, I have no items. I just note that we have a written statement for item 9A, a public comment that I will need to read at that time.
If I go too fast, remind me and cut me off.
Okay.
That brings us to public statements for items not on the agenda. If there's any member of the public that has anything they want to share, you can just unmute yourself. If you choose to, you can identify yourself. You're not required to, and it's your turn to speak.
I'll go for one.
Sammy, go ahead.
As a member of the public, I was wondering if you guys had plans to schedule any drive-in movies or concerts at our parks.
Laura, I know that we don't get into a discussion right now, but is there anything like that coming up?
Yeah, we do have one, a potential one that might be coming up. It's not technically through the Park District at this time, but it's through the Rotary. So the anticipated date is April 2nd. So that'll be a drive-in concert. The Simi Valley Chamber is planning on having one too, the Valentine's weekend, Friday and Saturday.
And I saw one of them might be a Queen band.
Green Nation is the one, April 2nd.
And I do see that Adam is on the call, but Adam, I imagine it's for the item a little bit later.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, we'll wait till that.
Okay.
Any other member of the public with a comment? That brings us to approval of minutes. Any discussion of the minutes?
I'll move approval.
Elena moves to approve. And
I move for approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Kate, you're in
Aye.
favor? That's 5-0 then. That brings us to the consent agenda. Anybody want to discuss anything on the consent agenda, or is there a motion?
I had a couple of questions about well, I had a question on the accounts payable on page 6. It's a check right at the bottom of the page. I'm just curious what we were doing as a check. Hang on, it's check number 96120 for Norman Covenants for $8,752.50. And I'm just curious what that was for.
For a personnel investigation.
Okay,
Director O'Brien, that's for a personnel
seems
investigation.
like. I'm sorry, say again?
A personnel investigation.
Okay,
Are there any motions to approve the consent agenda?
and I just,
Oh, I'm sorry. Kate has another question.
I just had another question about the payroll, I'm sorry, what?
We are waiting for you. Kate, it sounded like you were saying you had a question about payroll.
I was, but the sound is in and out, and I can't make out what people are saying. Adjustment, can somebody tell me what happened? Because it looks like there was an adjustment,
I can explain.
and then on the 12/18 one, payrolls, the paychecks were debited. I'm just confused.
On 12/4, there was an error in the processing. Exempt full-time
Okay.
employees were paid for a second holiday in error. It should have been one holiday, so there was a correction run on
Oh, okay,
12/8.
okay,
And then the final register 12/18 settles all the credits and all that, but we had to do a correction on 12/8. But everything has been resolved.
okay. All right. Okay,
Is there any others?
Yeah, on 6B for the budget calendar. When the time comes, or would we wait to take into account COVID in the event? For some of these seem to be in person in July, August. Would we just wait until a month before and then make a determination based off the events leading up to it, whether we would do any of these events via Zoom, or is that something that should be brought up now?
So my thought is when we approve the calendar, we're approving when the meetings are, and then how we do the meetings will come up as we get closer, so we can determine what's necessary and what's
Okay.
possible. As far as Zoom, my personal opinion is I'd like to continue offering it to the public so they don't have to come to a building, that maybe from home they could tune in, they could join in. But I'll speak about it a little bit more detail with our response to coronavirus. My thought is that as we get closer, obviously some of our meetings might continue to be in person.
Okay.
I'm sorry, some of our meetings will continue to be online.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
See no other questions. Any motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve.
I saw
I'll move to
Ed,
approve.
and I heard Kate with a second. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
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 And Elaine, you were in favor?
Yes.
That brings us to presentations, scheduled items, and public hearings. A is presentation of the full-time employee of the month for December 2020.
Honorable Chair, members of the board, Barbara was unable to attend this evening, but she did ask me to read a statement that she prepared. She said she appreciates receiving this award and apologizes for not being here tonight. She enjoys her work here and very much would like to thank everyone for all their hard work during this difficult past year. She would also like to wish everyone a happy and much better 2021. And special congratulations to Tracy, and she will miss you very much. So that's from Barbara by now.
And then that brings us to item B, recognition of retiring director of recreation.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Directors. Today is Tracy's official last day, so we have a meeting on the same day that she is officially off the payroll tomorrow. So congratulations to her. If I could take the privilege to a minute to read the resolution. There's a resolution before you for approval. It's a resolution of the Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District, resolution number 2003, resolution of appreciation to Tracy Engel. Whereas Tracy Engel has worked for the Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District with honor, integrity, and dignity for 26 years. And whereas during her tenure at Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District, Tracy Engel provided thoughtful and experienced leadership in the position she held. And whereas those positions included Tracy's first role upon hire on May 31st, 1994, as the Community Park Center Supervisor at the Rancho Santa Susana Community. Then she became a Recreation Supervisor 2 on December 29th, 1995, and culminated her career when she was promoted to the Director of Recreation position on April 20th, 2018. Whereas Tracy has provided a tremendous contribution at the district, from running the community center at its inception to advocating for the district's first skate plaza, advancing the recreations department's organization, implementing new programs and classes for the community. And now therefore it be resolved that the Board of Directors of the Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District does hereby laud and publicly commend Tracy Engel for her strong work ethic and dedication to the principles of honest public service. With the signature of the Chairman of the Board of Directors affixed on this resolution, the district publicly recognizes and honors Tracy Engel for her many years of service. May Tracy Engel's years of retirement be filled with true happiness, good health, and continued service to the community. The foregoing resolution was approved by the Board of Directors at the Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District at a regular meeting held on January 7th, 2021. So with that, that's the item before you, Board. And I just want to personally commend Tracy for her years of service, 26, nothing but exemplary leadership. And in the 2 years that I've been with her, she's done an outstanding job as the director of the department.
Normally, I give this to you in person, but I have this for you. And it's a tile. So I'm thinking you take it out, instead of putting it on the wall, maybe you tile something with it so you can look at it. So at this moment, at this time, board members, if you wish to speak, and then members of the public about this topic. I'll cut you off. Elaine, you were saying something?
Oh, I didn't know if Ed was ready.
Go ahead, Elaine.
I just want to say, I got to know her actually. I worked on Cajun for so many years, and Rotary, as you know, took over the park, and her help with Rotary was unbelievable. I mean, and helpful, like she is at all events. And that was my first real exposure to her. And I can tell you how valuable you were to the organization and to the district. And I will really miss you, but I'm really happy for you at the same time. Thank you for everything. Okay. Thank you.
Ed?
Sure. Well, Tracy, I know I've told you this a bunch of times, but you've been awesome. You've been great to work with. There's no one that can measure up to you in terms of your enthusiasm and your passion, and that means so much. To me, under your time as Director of Recreation, probably the most important thing that recreation can do is what's done with the after school clubs, and we've brought them to a new level, and you should be so proud of that. Again, we've continued to excel with our recreation programs even during this past year to the extent that we can, and you should just be so proud of the legacy that you've left really in the short time that you were Director of Recreation and so much that you accomplished. So if I had to give you a score though, it'd be 99 out of 100. And number 4 behind me with the football in his hand is who's keeping me from making it 100. So, but just outstanding. I'm so grateful to have known you. As I think everyone knows, I do like dealing with the department heads a lot, and you've always had an open door for me and answered all my questions. So that means a lot to me. To me, that's an important part of what you do is your interaction with the board. And I'm really going to miss you. I wish you the best. You deserve the best.
Thank you.
Kate?
Yes, I want what everyone else said. I think that it's been an honor to have known you and have worked with you as long as I have. I can't believe it's been that long, but you're leaving big shoes to fill, and we are going to miss you and your cheeriness and your optimism and your can-do-it attitude. It's been a pleasure working with you and knowing you.
Thank you.
I'll tack on. I'm really sorry you're leaving so soon. I wish I'd had the opportunity to build that same relationship with you that everybody else has had the opportunity to do over the years. But I look forward to getting to admire for the coming years and seeing all the things that you did put in, and clearly all the heart and soul that went into it, and how great a job you did. I hope you absolutely adore what's coming ahead, and you get immense satisfaction from it. So best of luck, and thank you for your service.
Mark, do you want to comment on this?
I've already talked to Tracy many times, but congratulations, you made it to the good life. And when I come through Texas, I'm going to look you up. Thank you.
Tracy, for me, St. Valley is a better place for everyone, but especially young people, with the completion of projects, including the skate plaza. And I want to let you know that future generations might not know the work that went in of staff and volunteers and community members talking about it, but they'll enjoy it. And I think the same thing, the things I enjoyed today, I don't know who did that work a long time ago, but they're going to thank you even though they don't know to thank you for some of your work on that. And then also, there's a lot of people here tonight. I'm going to call on them, but I want you to remember what they said, because it's exciting in that way. It's exciting. I mean, I've skated that plaza, and for the record, I've never dropped in, and I'm not going to. I thought about it. It doesn't seem like a good idea. And I don't know a guy big enough to hold me up to keep me steady on a drop. I'm not doing that, but I've skated the rest of it, and it's amazing. It's fun, and kids are having fun out there. We're going to go to other staff members and then members of the public. Any other staff members want to comment? Just unmute yourself and go ahead. All right, members of the public.
Hi, Tracy. Congratulations, first of all. I didn't know you were going to retire so soon. Very happy for you. I just wanted to give you a huge thank you from me and speaking for the whole skateboarding community for making the skate plaza happen. I think without you, it wouldn't have happened for many years to come. You know, we were trying to get it done since the early 90s. You know, my friends have been trying to get it done, and it took your leadership and your enthusiasm to make it happen. And we're all so grateful for you. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you so much.
Adam, I would ask you to do a trick on Zoom, but I'm not sure if we're liable if you happen, so I appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
Any
of course.
members of the Park District or a member of the public wish to speak?
I just wanted to congratulate Tracy officially on your retirement. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you in your current capacity for these last couple of years. I'm going to miss you, but I'm so happy for you. I wish you well in your retirement, and on behalf of the whole administration team, thank you for your service to Rancho Simi and to the communities. So good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
One idea you shared with me was the Philadelphia plan. Am I getting that right? For skate parks? I plan to continuously research and see how we can implement that. If anyone's interested in that, we could talk about that at a later date, but that's inspired me about the design of parks and how that could be included also. That's going to take us to continued business unless there's anyone else to speak.
Can I just add a few words?
Sorry, yes, you should be able to speak.
Everyone knows me, I always have something to say. So I'll just make this brief because I've had an opportunity to, talk with everyone individually. And, I really believe that if you want to be the best, you have to surround yourself with the best. the best brings out the best. I think every challenge I had just made me want to accomplish more. And when Teresa talked to me about a resolution, I was like, no, not me. You know, I can't have a resolution. That's for someone else. You know, that's for someone that, you know, I aspire to be. And today I feel like I am that person. And I do have a lot of pride. I really appreciate every opportunity that's been given to me. You know, I really feel like, again, being in this environment just allowed me to be who I really am. I wanted to work hard, and some days were hard, and some days were extremely pleasurable experiences I would have never had. And it not only meant something to me, it means something to my girl, my daughter. She's 27 years old. She grew up with me in this department and this agency. And sometimes I see people that she's affiliated with and they don't have some of her experiences. She didn't grow up as a rec family. She didn't go to the park and participate in those things. And it just, I see the difference that it's made in my life, the difference it's made in my family's life. And my husband and I had the same career, and it's just been a tremendous blessing. And I couldn't be more proud of being Resolution 2003. I just think that's incredible. And the fact that it's me, and I aspired to achieve, and I was able to do that. And the Park District provided me with opportunities to promote and progress and to really just do what I needed to do with the support that was required of me. And I'm so proud of all my teammates. I'm really proud of the administrative crew. I mean, without the foundation, you know, really nothing can happen unless we have a solid base. And that comes from our board. That comes from the administrative crew, and that comes from the support of the community. This community understands and appreciates what we're all about. And it just drove me every single day. And believe me, we'll all be missed. I'm not deleting any phone numbers or pictures out of my phone. I can't let go. I mean, I'm really excited about going to Texas, and I know we're going to have a lot of really great opportunities, but this will never leave me. This is a part of me, and it's been so important to me. And I thank all of you for enabling that for me. God bless you. I just appreciate you all. And I don't intend to be, I will intend to be gone, but not forgotten. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Tracy, if you see any good ideas at the parks in Texas, please send them back to us.
You got it.
So is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Elaine makes the motion and Kate seconded it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The board 5-0 has agreed to approve that resolution. That brings us to continued business. Item A is status of the district's response to coronavirus pandemic. It's a verbal report.
Thank you, Chair. I have a very brief report. As the board's probably aware, the regional stay-at-home order was extended for 3 weeks until January 18th, which means we'll continue to operate in our current mode. All the outdoor spaces are open, and fields are open, parks are open, and trails are open. And a lot of our indoor stuff is closed. So we will continue that through at least January 18th, and I'm hopeful that we'll get some relief and be able to expand our operations after that date. I did want to note, if the board recalls, youth sports conditioning and training and practice was allowed because the state had issued guidelines for that, but adult sports was not allowed. I did get a hold of the county and we got some clarification, and there's new guidelines. Adult sports is also allowed to do conditioning and training and those kind of things in compliance with those guidelines. So that's good news for our adult softball community and other adult sports. And we have are renting field space to them as well. And then finally, we had one complaint that I'm aware of in the last few weeks, and that was a concern with mask wearing up around the Chumash Park area, to which we had the rangers go out and educate on masks and the requirements for that. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions from that report? My first question is for after-school clubs or childcare, is there been any more closures? And my second question is, when we notify families, how do we do that? And I mean specifically, like, is it a phone call, an email? So about the notifications, and has there been any more closures or exposure, or someone's exposed and we have to communicate to get tested and that information?
I'll Chair, I'll ask our recreation supervisor, recreation coordinator, who are here to provide you the answer on that. So Danielle or Richard?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer. First things first, the most important statistic is that we have not had any transmission within the site of any site for the duration of the COVID pandemic. We have had obviously a couple of times in which locations have been shut down, none since the last time that a report was given. But again, when a case has come and it's led to a shutdown, we have had folks been tested that have been exposed, and there has been zero transmission, which obviously speaks to the policies and procedures that we have in place. To your question in regards to contact of parents, we actually do it twofold. Our site director, who is most familiar with parents, will make phone contact with each and every parent. And then from there, they kind of hand over communication to me. That's typically done via email, so that if they have any questions, they can itemize them to me. And then I release a general statement on district letterhead that goes to each and every parent that explains what we're doing, what the process will be, and any important dates surrounding the closure.
And Richard, as a part of that, if there was a student that comes in and they had tested positive, are all the other students required to get tested?
It really is. We'd like to look at things on a case-by-case basis. What it ultimately comes down to is exposure. We would always follow the direction of the Ventura County Public Health. But to give you an example, if a child is within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, that tends to be the danger zone. That would certainly be a situation in which you would want that child to get tested. I am happy to report, however, that parents have been using an abundance of caution. If there's any kind of COVID case that has come within the site, all parents have taken it upon themselves to get their children tested.
And are we requiring them to get tested? It sounds like they're doing it anyways.
It typically falls, again, kind of case by case, but it would either be a test or following the mandated quarantine period.
Then
And we have had individuals as well who were potentially exposed, whether it was because they went to school or over weekends or things like that. So those students isolated out as precaution, but that didn't affect the overall running of the program either. So we do want to make note that there are students who individually are not coming to the program due to isolation requirements, but again, they weren't impacting our program.
Darren, I'd like to add, to the extent that in that environment, if our staff are exposed, we take the precautions and we require our staff to go get tested and to have a negative test result before they return to the work site.
And as a part of that, Richard, I don't mean to debate a finer point. I think you are likely right that there has not been any spread at a site, but I would argue that we would say that we know of. What I mean by that is 2 students might spread it and one of them never has symptoms, and then somebody in their family gets it and their family member has no idea. So that we know of, obviously nothing spread at our sites, but it's hard to figure out where people are getting it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I'm happy to walk that comment back. My original comment was in reference to the return of COVID tests. As they've come in, we've had nothing but negatives for anybody that was directly in contact with the person in question. But yeah, I'm happy to clarify that.
My next part to our response to the coronavirus pandemic is any of us could donate blood if you're eligible. And the reason that this is important is when we talk about opening things up, one of the ways we do that is our case numbers go down. Another way we do that is hospitals open up. And if you donate blood and you had it, maybe you knew about it, maybe you did not, your blood could be used for current patients, which means if we want to get schools open and businesses open, we could do something. Now, I know we're not all eligible to donate blood, but if you want to check it out, we're doing 2 at our sites. Outside groups are organizing them. One is on the 12th of January and one is on the 12th of February. I'm donating blood on the 12th. If after this meeting anyone wants to join me, I'll send you the invite. There's an app on the Red Cross. You could donate and it's a very small thing and I don't have any antibodies, so it's not helping out there, but you get an app with points and you can level up. by recruiting more people to donate blood and donating blood multiple times. So I tested negative, no antibodies, but if you've tested positive or know anybody and they've recovered, there's something that we could do. Any other comments on the response to the coronavirus pandemic? That brings us to item B, follow-up discussion regarding new district logo and community outreach and promotion plan logo applications, including potential direction or redirection to staff.
Chair and board members, as the board's aware, we've discussed our community outreach and promotions plan, including the logo, a couple of times. I just want to make sure, in light of concern and it raised at the last meeting and subsequent to the last meeting, I wanted to put this on to make sure two things. One, that I have clear direction from the board as we stand now, and also wanted to ensure that the board believes we're headed in the right direction with the plan and the logo. So with that, we'd recommend that the board just have a follow-up discussion on this item and provide any additional direction or redirection that the board may desire. That concludes staff's report.
Members of the board, any questions or comments?
So Brian, I have a number of things that I'd like to say.
Go ahead.
All right, so I actually, I initially wanted this on the agenda, then I was willing to do it as board member comments, and then the district manager wanted to have it on the agenda, so I'm okay with any of that. There's two basic concerns I have about the way this has been handled. One is more the legal, philosophical, moral concern, and that is the failure for the board, and in my case as a specific director, to get the complete information that I requested. The second one, which I'll address at less length, because I think we all know what we want, and the second has to do with the quality of the logo. So as to the first, the failure to get the information that was requested, we cannot forget that we as board members direct policy. The district manager does not direct policy. And I know and I understand, and there's issues that I've wanted to see discussed in the past. And for one example, we were talking about the board schedule, where there's some things you want to explore that maybe sound good, but you do take into account what effect it'll have on the staff, the time involved, and all of that. And then you weigh the pluses and minuses of it. And so I withdrew that issue, for example. But there are other times where the issue is important enough and you want the information that you want, whichever way the vote goes. And so the concern I had here is that for some reason it's being attributed to lack of direction or lack of communication in terms of what was expected here. I listened to the November 19 meeting when we initially discussed this 2 times. And the discussion on the community outreach, and the bulk of which was spent on the logo, not the entire discussion, but the bulk of which was spent on the logo, began 38 minutes into the meeting and it ended 93 minutes into the meeting. During the course of that meeting, on at least 9, and I say at least 9 because these would be significant mentions. There were also lesser mentions, but I'll stick with the number 9. On at least 9 occasions, I was clear in my concern about the logo being too busy with the trees and the hills in it, and to get other options and to see other options. It wasn't, I've listened to it. I've listened to it as a whole once to get a perspective of how it sounded just as a whole, not just piece by piece. And then I went through and just took different excerpts from it to illustrate. And the message was clear. 44 minutes into the meeting, I indicated that the logo was too busy. We need to refresh it with a cleaner logo. It's defeating the purpose to include both the trees and the hills in it. 45 minutes into the meeting, I essentially repeated the same statement. The third mention on my part was about 49 minutes into the meeting, and I indicated if we're truly looking at branding, hills without trees are snazzier. again, the message was clear. 51 minutes into the meeting, specifically, I indicated I would not do both the trees and the hills. It's too busy. We need a different look. Then later on in the meeting, after others spoke, 66 minutes into the meeting, I made a statement that the logo was distracting. I made the comment that maybe, and this was directed at Dan and Diane, maybe you can come up with a couple more ideas on the logo. And at that time, Chair Dennert was vice chair, and I said, like, Vice Dennert's idea of a couple more logos, and I indicated again the logo is too busy. 84 minutes into the meeting, again, I referred to Vice Chair Dennert's idea of getting a couple more variations on the logo, and I asked the entire board, again, keeping in mind I was chair at the time, is everyone in agreement? All board members acknowledged with either a sure or a yes. And then, again, repeating what was desired, 89 minutes into the meeting, I referred to both Chair Dennert and to the district manager and just said, maybe we can just find a way to do something that incorporates trees, but not in the logo. And that was in response to a comment that came from the district manager, which I'll get to shortly. I'll also indicate that other board members did comment on this to some extent. Chair Dennert, at that time, Vice Chair Dennert, 56 minutes into the meeting, said, I'm fine if we are not set on a logo. I want to commit to where we know there is specific meaning, willing to do a more exploration of the logo. 57 minutes into the meeting, Chair Dennert, then Vice Chair Dennert, acknowledged that it's a good point about the busyness of the logo. 60 minutes into the meeting, Chair Dennert, then Vice Chair Dennert, again expressed his understanding of the busyness of the logo and suggested a couple more ideas on the logo. 88 minutes into the meeting, again, this is getting to the conclusion of the discussion, Chair Dennert, then Vice Chair Dennert, indicated if trees do not have any specific meaning, I am open to different ways of incorporating trees. If your designer comes up with something else that refreshes the logo, I am open to that.
Ed, I don't mean to cut you off, and I'll definitely listen at full length to all of your comments, but we should ask if there's any members of the public that wish to speak before we get into any discussion. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this item? And Dan, am I remembering correctly, 1 and LM2 are staff? That's our extra devices?
I'll have to defer to Lee on that. Lee, are you on the line?
Yeah.
Lee, is LM2 and 1 both staff?
LM2 is me, and 1, I don't know who they are.
So any members of the public, whether that's 1 or anybody else, any comments on this item? All right, then Ed, I apologize for interrupting you. Continue.
No worries. Okay, at least you picked the part where it was a good breaking point. So the next part, and this will be briefer, but in trying to be fair about this, it's a question of both what was communicated and what the understanding of the communication was by those involved. So Diane, and I apologize, whose last name I didn't write down, from Mustang, made some comments on this issue as well. In response to the comments that I made early into the meeting, and this was 47 minutes into the meeting, Diane said, quote, some of our designers agreed with you. They wanted to take out one or the other, and that was in reference to the trees or the hills. And the reference agreed with you was that they agreed with me. So again, there was a clear understanding of what was being requested and why it was being requested. 50 minutes into the meeting, in regard to, and this was when I made mention of the sleeker design with the hills but without the trees, Diane commented, it would look nice. It is very symmetrical if you do take out the trees. It also means it also makes it more flexible to get rid of the trees. That is the upside of getting rid of the trees. And again, I'm not trying to say that Diane was advocating one position or the other. What I'm trying to demonstrate is there was a clear understanding of what the expectation was for the next meeting. 58 minutes into the meeting, Diane said, happy to do more exploration of the logo and show it to you in ads, which they did show it in ads, and that is appreciated. She went on to say, this is always a tough decision. It takes a lot of work. And then most importantly, 86 minutes into the meeting, I addressed Diane and I said, can we come up with 1 or 2 examples of logos without trees? Maybe come up with examples so we can see the difference. 1 or 2 with trees, 1 or 2 without trees. Something that incorporates trees, but not in the logo. You will provide us with alternatives, right? And Diane said, we will. And then finally, the district manager responded on several occasions during the meeting, again, expressing that it was clear what we were trying, and I want to understand, there's a lot of things that go on in the course of a park board meeting. I want to be fair about this, and what someone understands at some point maybe changes at another point. That's not for me to judge or not to judge. But in terms of what was understood at the time this discussion took place, the district manager, 47 minutes into the meeting, after I discussed the concept of the trees being too busy, said, I do not disagree with that comment at all. The district manager, 54 minutes into the meeting, suggested keeping the seal with the trees and refreshing the logo as a way to go, and indicated that logo could either include trees or not include trees. Again, suggesting that he understood exactly what was being requested and being discussed. 86 minutes into the meeting, the district manager made a suggestion, and this again is toward the end of the discussion of the logo. We could keep the tree as part of our brand mark, and then we need to decide whether we keep it as part of the logo or not part of the logo. So the point is, it was clearly an understanding that we wanted some modifications, some different examples of the logo. And I will point out, Chair Denner, even when, in voting with the majority on the current logo that we chose, alluded to that, and I commend the chair for that at the December meeting, that he kind of expected some more examples or some more variations on the logo than what we got. So the understanding was clear, but it really goes beyond that. It's not as simple as saying, well, okay, it doesn't matter anymore. The majority's voted. They've decided that we're going to go with the logo that was originally discussed, and everything's great. Since there's a majority, we don't have to worry about the rest of it, but we do. We're a democracy here. The majority rules, but the minority has rights. The minority has a right to be heard. They have a right to be informed. And credit to our district, we have a policy that respects that. We allow a board member to bring an item to the agenda and have that item properly discussed on the agenda. That can happen at any time. And so part of that is being fully informed on that item. It's not a question of whether the district manager or anyone on the board for that matter can count heads and say, well, we have a majority that's going the other way, so we don't fully have to discuss the issue. That's not the point. The point isn't whether there's a majority that likes one thing or another. It's having a complete, full discussion of what board members requested. Now, obviously, that's within reason. And I bring that up because what was requested by me specifically and then agreed to by the board unanimously was that we be given other examples, not what was discussed at the December meeting about the $10,000 version, but just to provide 1 or 2 other examples so that we can see the difference, we can have some choice, and that never took place. And that is concerning. And it's more than just the principle of the thing. I just want to point out some of the things that if we didn't live by this idea of if one board member brings an idea, we're going to explore that idea. Think about what may not have happened just in the past year. If we hadn't gone with that principle, and I credit the chair for that, we wouldn't be going forward with this whole idea of recognizing Martin Luther King Day as a day of service. Now, granted, we're being a little, a pandemic and some other restrictions are maybe keeping us from doing it the way we want to do it, but we wouldn't be there if it was a question of requiring all board members to want to go forward with an idea before all the information is presented. Televised meetings. The reason I was able to go back and watch the meeting a couple times, the reason that the Oak Park people are happier, the Oak Park community is happier with us, the whole idea of transparency. I know the Acorn is happier with us. The fact that we have televised meetings, that started off as an idea from me, and it wound up being a unanimous vote by the board. So you're never going to get to majorities, unanimous votes, or try things out if you don't have an openness and you don't provide full information that a board member wants, even if he's going to wind up in the minority in the end. But at least then you were fully heard. And that's the problem with it. And just another example. It started off as 2 of us, and then it was a 2-2 vote, and then it was 3-2, and then I think finally it wound up 4-1. And what a great idea it was, but to allow bikes and skateboards and scooters in the park. And these are all things that happened in the past year. And if we had started off with a counting heads idea on these things, we never would have gotten to the point where we got. So it's not just a question of, did the majority vote a certain way? Did they not? The whole problem comes down to the fact that the information wasn't provided as requested. And I have to say, I do, and I've expressed it, and I continue to express that I do have some agitation with the district manager about this because it's happened before. Having said that, I want to be fair to the district manager. I received an email on Monday, which was much appreciated, and the whole idea here for me is going forward. And it was an encouraging email going forward where the district manager wants to correct the issue and is going to take steps to ensure that this type of situation doesn't arise again. And I do want to commend the district manager for that. That's the type of response I would hope to have. And to me, that indicates progress, and I applaud that. And there's one other thing I do want to applaud the district manager on. So it's not, I want to be fair about this. And that is the fact that the district manager brought the issue of the logo to the board for a vote in the first place, because that to me demonstrates an understanding that the logo does play an important part of the community outreach program. But we also have to understand that you can't have it both ways. You can't say it's important at one point, not important at another. Important means a full, informed discussion of the issues. And so that brings me then to the second part of it, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, and that is the quality of the logo. It's an acceptable logo. Do I love it? No. Do I even like it? No. Is it acceptable? Sure. But come on, I talk about it almost at every board meeting. Many of us talk about it. We're proud of our district. We have standards that we live up to. It may be an acceptable logo, but it certainly doesn't live up to the high standards of our district. And for me personally, the one thing I would like is I still want to see other examples. I want to see some true, and I don't mean tanking it and just throwing out anything, but something without the $10,000 version where we see a couple variations of the logo and at least can be comfortable with whatever decision that we're going to make. And I want to point out, there's not the urgency to this that for some reason was displayed in December, because at that November meeting, there was an exchange between Diane from Mustang and myself where we talked about the fact, sometimes it's great to break things out in the new year, but this is a different time. This is a different year. And if there's ever a time for some sort of exploration, if there's ever a time to take your time and get something like this right, this is the time, because this is not exactly, business isn't exactly booming right now. And I think about all this, and I think about the rush to do this and to do it without all the information. I even blame myself a little here, because just in the last couple days, once I've gotten past the whole thing that I didn't even know how it was spelled until I saw it in the minutes. I used the word gypped at the last meeting, but I think, yeah, Gina must have looked that up. But now I know how gypped is spelled. But once I get past the whole idea of feeling gypped on this whole issue, you know, I started thinking about the whole logo thing and whether we stick with the exact same logo that we have, or whether we change it now or at some point, whatever we do. I mean, wouldn't this be, especially in this time where people are looking for some excitement and we know that the community loves our park district, wouldn't this have been a great time to do something like a logo design competition, or at least maybe come up with 3 variations of the logo, including the one that the other 4 board members chose at the last meeting, and have the public vote on it, or do something fun like that where the community then embraces the logo going forward. Because if we're doing this the right way, if it's truly part of refreshing things and refining things, this is an opportunity to come up with a logo that means something to the community for decades to come. And, you know, maybe it winds up being the same one that was chosen. But I just throw that out as an idea. I'm not saying that we need to do that or that we should do that. All I'm saying is that something was rushed here without full information that didn't need to be rushed. And those were my 2 concerns on the issue. So that's what I have. Thank you, Chair.
Elaine, I believe you were going to speak.
I just want to say I respect your opinions, Ed. I don't think it was rushed. I think the board all said they, you know, 4 of us said we wanted to keep the tree somehow in the logo. It's representative of the district and has been since the 60s, I think. And so I didn't feel rushed at all, and I felt comfortable with my vote. So I guess that's where we differ, because I didn't feel a need to have additional logos presented to me. I thought I like the hills, consistent with what we are, and we always had the trees. And I think the rest of the board said they wanted to keep the trees, or that's my impression. So I'm comfortable with where we are.
Kate or Josh?
Yeah, I'm also comfortable with the decision we made last time, rushed or not. I don't know. I do feel strongly about keeping the tree logo, because that's been there since the beginning, and I think you see that, you automatically think Rancho Simi, at least I do. So I probably want to, if we're going to vote on anything tonight, I'm probably going to vote the same way I did last time. So.
Josh?
I really do appreciate you speaking out on this, Ed. I did have I really like your idea of, and I wish we would have done it, of community participation, but I also understand how this report was made. I don't think, I think how the process went about it wasn't intended for this necessarily, is my interpretation, that it was meant to build out social media response and outreach in that regard. And then the logo kind of popped up and then it just happened, where I do agree that I think a community participation, involvement, engagement would have been a better avenue in which to decide or make any decisions about a logo. I did have a follow-up question though I want to make sure I understood your point, Ed. You, and I may be paraphrasing here, you said without the, in your comments just now, you said without the $10,000 version. Can I ask you to expand on that? What do you mean without paying $10,000 for Mustang to just build us a thing? Or do you mean like without the time investment, what do you mean by that?
Right. Well, that was in reference to at the December meeting when you were on the board, Josh, Chair Dennert asked the question of to start from scratch and to do the full-blown explanation, a rough idea of what the cost would be. And I believe the representative from Mustang, Diane, answered, they're doing work for us anyway, but if it was considered as a separate item, it would be about $10,000. The point that I was trying to make at the November meeting, we weren't asking for explanation from the beginning. my understanding, and if I understood Chair Dennert's comments at the December meeting as well as his comments at the November meeting, was that there would not be the full-blown exploration from the beginning, but that we would be given examples of a logo with a couple different color variations, with the trees or without the trees, something along the lines of what the district manager had mentioned at the November meeting, which was that the trees could be part of a brand mark, and then there could either be trees or not be trees in the actual logo. We never got that. And I guess my point about that is, whether we're changing the logo or not, it's the bigger picture of a board member requests something and doesn't get what they're requesting. And so the decision was being made without the complete information that we as a board requested. And I will say this, when that request was made at the November meeting, and I've watched the video and that portion of the video many times, each board member, including Director Freeman, said sure or yes to the notion that we would be given other examples of the logo. And that did not happen. And so that's the separate concern, apart from whether we're doing a different logo or not. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
May I speak up?
Yeah, Elaine?
I thought we did get variations. It was variations of the same material, but we did get variations at our last meeting where we voted. With and without the tree, and the tree in a different location. It wasn't a full redesign, but there were modifications and options for us.
So my thoughts on the meeting that we had is, we did give direction to show us variations of the logo, and we did get variations of the logo, but I was expecting there might be more to that. So I don't think anyone purposely misinterpreted it or went against our direction. I could have been more clear in my words that I expected a variety of remixes of it, basically. But with that said, I looked at the logo. I like the logo, but I'm not sure if you ever tell me, do you like this logo? And I like it. And you say, there's another one. Do you want to see it? I'm going to say, of course I want to see it. Now, if you say, do I want to pay for it? Well, I'm not so sure about that. How much does that cost? But like tonight's meeting, I like this logo. But if you tell me we can look at another logo next month, I'm interested in that. Although maybe not the cost, and not the cost of time, but the expense that might incur. The other part to that is what Ed mentioned earlier about convincing other people through a full discussion. Now, tonight, a few board members said they'd like the logo as is, and you voted that way, and we should respect your vote, and I understand. But possibly if it was mixed up in a different version, you would look at it and you would like it. Or maybe you would say, I want to keep it the same. So if we bring this back, we're not going to slow down our marketing much in my mind. And if that's incorrect, Dan in a few minutes will correct me. We won't, the rollout might be later, but the other work we can work on. And if we bring it to the public, I like that suggestion, but I wouldn't want to start with just, this is the logo, do you like it? Because a bunch of people are going to like it and a bunch of people are not going to like it. That doesn't really give us accurate feedback. And if we said design a logo, well, we might have people participate, but are we going to say design a logo and then go back and say, well, we didn't like any of your logos, we're going with this one we already had? Or are we going to get stuck with one of the logos? As an example, the UK had a contest to name a research vessel, and the internet voted for Bodie McBoatface. And then they refused to honor that vote, and they named a submarine Bodie McBoatface instead. So what I mean by that is, we bring it to the public, I would like to lock it down to a couple choices and say, here's what we're thinking of. Which one do you prefer of these? And I like the idea of engaging the public with some parameters. So we're not asking to design it and a couple people participate, and it's pretty good, but we already like that one. And it feels wrong to tell that person, well, you're the best of the public that designed it, but we had our staff already design one that we're going to go with instead. So tonight at this meeting, we have some choices. There is no proposed motion from staff, but staff could, we could propose to request more variations at a future meeting. We could not make a motion. We could request a quote for how much a brand new logo would be from scratch. But as we do that, let's consider a couple ideas. One, Elaine and Kate, you both said you like the trees, but I had a question for you. You like trees or those specific trees?
I would like to point out that there was input at the last meeting from the public, from Oak Park people on the logo.
Elaine,
One person.
Elaine with the trees and Kate with the trees. Did you like trees or those specific trees? Like we say, come back with different versions.
I like
come
those
back with
trees.
another version I like, but there's not trees.
Those are the trees that I personally associate with our logos we've had all along. So, I mean, if we're gonna do new trees, we might as well just not do trees at all, it seems like, to me.
And Elaine, is that the same for you, which is those specific trees?
No, those specific trees. They are a symbol of the district. And that's why I wanted to keep them, because everybody knows that's a symbol of the district.
Yeah, that was my thinking as well.
And I'm fine with going slow. If somebody makes the motion and seconds it, and at a future meeting, we look at some remixes and then we decide to go with the same logo. I'm not gonna say, Ed, you were wrong to bring it back, because what was important to you is the process and we did it correctly.
Right.
So, Chair,
Actually,
may I
I'm
ask-
fine with doing that again.
may I ask the district manager a question, Chair?
Yes.
Okay, so the question that I have, and again, I refer back to the November meeting. The question that I have is, I'm not talking about the idea of exploring from the beginning a logo, but providing a couple of variations that don't require the research, the whole going from the beginning part. The representative from Mustang indicated that they were willing to do that at the November meeting. So it seems to me that we could come up without much cost, if any. It's just basically the time they spend on the community outreach program of coming up with a couple of, a couple of quality variations to the logo that was selected in December, just so we can see what it entails. The impression that was given at the November meeting is that would just be part of the regular work that they're doing. Is there something that has changed on that?
The way I understand it is we got to remember they did not pay us for any logo. Part of our contract, we have no logo work. So any work that she does on the logo is not a part of the work that they're doing. Relative to the variations to the logo, I think they interpreted that mistakenly so, potentially, like I did, was we were looking at variations of the existing logo with the trees, without the trees, without the hills. And the examples were work examples of taking the existing logo to do that. So I think when we asked her that question, and I can ask her again, when we talked about variations, I think she was thinking like I misinterpreted you, Ed, that we were just talking about examples with same logo, without the trees, without the hills, maybe a different size font. So that being said, I have reached out to her lately, and I believe that if there's any further work to be done on the logo, the one we have, there will be a charge for that. She quoted me the same number we quoted before, which is $10,000, but I would sit down with her and negotiate with direction from the board if it's more of a color change or more of, some little nuances, different font, different size, maybe different types of hills, it might be less. So
right. And I'm
just a basic, let me just go through this real quick. A basic logo work would be 10 grand. If we want a new logo, say like the school district did their new logo, just the logo, probably 20 to 25 grand. And then if we wanted a rebranding and it goes into all our materials, in the $50,000 range. And then that being said, what she also said was that when you I'm glad you guys are talking about this, but when you go out to the community, she's had that happen. And as that goes, there's more variations, more input, and that is time for her. So at that point, it almost becomes hourly for her because she's got to put a, a fixed number of hours on there. So we have a process that we start small and it continues to go. I would think she would say we're going to have to pay her more depending on our process.
So all I'm asking for is what was originally asked for and what you even suggested at the November meeting. And that's a variation or two where the brand mark with the trees would remain, but we'd actually have a sleeker, cleaner logo. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not saying research it from the beginning.
Right.
The same thing I asked for in November, that everyone understood, that she indicated an understanding to, and I've been through the quotes. I've listened to the meeting. The same thing that you understood. You're the one who came up with a couple of the suggestions, including maybe using it as a brand mark, and then an example or two incorporating in the logo or not incorporating in the logo. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for going from scratch.
Okay, I understand that now.
So I'm going to make it easier. I don't want to put any pressure on board members that have voted one way. I'll just ask that it be put on a future agenda to obtain that information and to discuss a new logo. And we'll see where it goes. But I just want to get the information that I requested.
Yeah, my gut tells me if I were to sit down with her and explain what we're talking about now, there's going to be a charge for it. And I would say, it'd be somewhere up to $10,000. And obviously we'd negotiate. She's reasonable and she's been very reasonable with us. And we'd talk about what we're after and she'll let me.
Can you do that part first then? Dan, can you do that part first? Just find out how much it would be, bring that information back to us at the next meeting. And with, have her listen back to the tape, you listen back to the tape and just get what we asked for and what I asked for at that November meeting and give us something to look at.
I can do what, I can do depends on,
So I'll request that the item go on the agenda for that
Let me
purpose.
just, if I could, Ed, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to check with the attorney because we do have a vote right now of 4-1 in December. So I'd defer to him on if we want to work that in there. Do we need to undo that December vote if we want to go in that direction? As a group.
Brian, as a part of that, we do have the rule that any one board member could put something on the agenda.
It's specific in the policy manual.
Yeah, and Brian, just for Mr. Pierik, in the staff report, I did say if the board wanted to, as a part of the discussion, the board could reaffirm its December 17th decision or reconsider its December 17th decision and direct staff to go in another direction. And also in the title of the item, I noted including potential direction or redirection to staff.
Chair Dennert,
Yes.
I understand what's on the table now, but would it be appropriate? I mean, I want to know how the majority of the board feels whether we should pursue this any further. I mean, would an emotion to accept our December decision or a motion to go out and explore further? But I feel that three of us anyway are satisfied.
Well, in the policies manual, I'm allowed to request that an item be on the agenda. So that's all I'm asking.
I agree with that. So the question is,
Okay.
should the board have a motion to either accept or reject your request? Is that where we are?
No, you can't reject it. It's in the policies manual. I can ask that it be put on the agenda.
Okay.
Brian, to Dan's question, did you hear it?
I think I did. There's been a lot of dialogue on it. I'm looking at the staff report. I think the staff report is broad enough to allow you to take whatever action you feel you want to. You could make a motion this evening, whatever motion you want to make. The subject is on the agenda, dealing with the logos, and the recommendation is to have a follow-up discussion and provide additional direction or redirection regarding the item if desired. So that basically leaves open your options as to how you want to proceed.
Ed, I heard your request for an item on the agenda, but I'm wondering if this meets your request, not for the item, but for the logo. So our staff designed much of the logo, and then Mustang Marketing interpreted it and mixed it around a little bit. Dan, am I right about that? Like they designed they finished up the logo, but we came up with the design?
No, what happened is, let me, if I could just take a little time, our initial meeting with Mustang, we talked about rebranding, we talked about the scope of their effort and what may be appropriate for the district. In that initial discussion with two folks from marketing, both principals, they said that we have a good reputation and we already have a brand and people know what our brand is. And we just needed to get more of our information out and connect to more people. So at that time, at the beginning of the engagement, we decided that we weren't going to do a new logo. Rather, it was going to be a plan to communicate what we do and how we do it more with the community. And I think it was appropriately said, I call it the 10th hour. Mustang said, oh, I see you guys are using this logo. Let us fiddle with it a little bit and clear it up and make it clear to read. And we'll give, they did that to us. And they said, along with that additional effort, here's our suggestions on your existing logo and how we would clean it up. That's how we got to having a new logo. And Mustang did that work. Now they did the work and presented the logo. And then we as staff, they gave us, basically they gave us different fonts and different things. It was pretty much in line with what you have now, but we vetted that as staff. We vetted it with the marketing consultant and we landed on the few options that we presented to you. So that's kind of the backstory. So that we went down a path of not even doing anything with our logo. And then we started in a direction of maybe wanting to do something with the logo.
If we ask staff to not redesign the logo, but take the one in this packet and mix it up a few different ways and come back, a few different colors, switch things up, maybe the font, but not dramatically start over. Keep the trees and show us one without the trees. Ed, would that meet what you're requesting, or are you specifically requesting that Mustang Marketing do that?
I'm fine if as long as it's a legitimate effort to provide a quality product, which is what I would expect from our staff. I'm fine with that. Not to sway it one way or another, but to give us a legitimate look that everybody can look at with an open mind. I am fine with that. And
Dan, do we have that capacity?
I'd prefer to, that's why we hired them as the graphic design piece. So I'd prefer to have them do the work than our staff.
So Ed, if I'm understanding you correctly, your request is for a future meeting on the agenda to have a discussion of the logo and for Dan to give you specifics from his negotiations with Mustang Marketing, like how much that might cost.
Right.
Yeah, that meeting, we probably wouldn't see the logos, but Dan might come to us with a price.
Right.
There'd be a motion, or maybe there wouldn't be a motion determining on that price.
And again, I would trust that for everything that's happened, that the district manager would knock himself out to get us the best price we can so that we can get the full information that we were promised.
And then speaking to Elaine, what you mentioned earlier about our previous vote, I think what you're asking is basically, should we have the discussion if we already know the conclusion, which is if they come to us with a $10,000 price, are we going to put off implementing the logo and there's no chance that we're going to consider that? Brian, is that something we could discuss right now? Like, can I say, if it came back that high, I'm not interested because this is on the agenda, the logo?
You do have the flexibility to have that conversation. Yes, the way the item is on the agenda, it is very broad in terms of its description of what you're going to be talking about and what your options are.
Well, we don't necessarily need a motion because Ed's not making a motion. He's requesting an agenda item, which means, are there any other comments on the discussion of the logo?
Again, this is part of our new process to make sure I have clear direction. The direction I have from the board right now is to implement a logo on a 4-1 vote. So if we want to slow that down, we can either undo that, and I can bring back, I think just bringing back a cost and a proposal from Diane is one thing, that's fine. And then the other thing would be if I actually bring you new logos. What I'm hearing the direction to be is to go talk to Diane, describe to her what we're after relative to the logo and get a price from her, and then come back to the board. In that case, I would say we could delay the 4-1 vote from the 17th and almost continue this item tonight, but I would have more information with you because I'd have a price of what it would take to do what Director Abela is asking for. So I'd almost like continue this item, direct me to go get a quote to do what Director Abela is asking for, and then come back once I have the price and kind of have this discussion. And then at that point, we would decide to do what to do with the December 17th decision. Because that at that point, we will be spending money that's different than the direction we did on the 17th, if that makes sense. So if I could just summarize, if we're going to go get a quote, I'd continue the item tonight. Let the 4-1 stand. I will go get a quote and bring it back to the board. It'll be a continued item similar to this. We will have a dollar amount to what Director Abel is after. And at that point, the board could decide, okay, do we want to go spend money on new logos, or do we want to just stick with the 4-1 decision of December, or whatever it was, of December 17th?
I can live with that. I think that makes sense.
And to clarify, Ed?
I'm fine with that. The one thing I'd ask the district manager, and I trust that you'll do this, especially after all this, just make a concerted effort to make it possible for us to get to the point where we can see a couple other logos.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, we're not gonna make it undo the December 17th decision. That's staying. I'm gonna go work with Diane and the staff to get a quote to talk on the price to I would call it a further cleanup or refinement of the existing logo that she presented to us. We'll call it some refinement of that logo. I will get a price from her, come back to the board with that price, and we will continue this discussion and decide if we want her to go out and refine the logo more at whatever price that might be. And to Kate and Elaine, we can the existing logo vote would still stand until that point. So we're basically just delaying it a little bit, and we're following up and we're clarifying the direction from November 19th, taking a little more time to do it.
And Chair, could I ask one more thing as part of the follow-up discussion, just in case we get to a point where we're getting close one way or the other? I would like to know, and I already heard what was said, and I appreciate and I accept that the issues there could be with, say, a logo competition. So I understand the problems with that. So I'm not asking any further information on that. But what I would be curious about is if the question can be asked of Mustang, or if the district manager just himself, through his own knowledge, could incorporate in the report. Let's say we had 2 or 3 different variations of a logo, and we somehow could put it to a public vote. Are there issues with that? Are there not issues with that? It could be an exciting idea for the community, but I could also see where perhaps it has some of the same negatives as a logo competition. So if we could just have a brief discussion on that aspect of it.
Ed, that would be at that meeting if we choose to have her show us some new designs.
It can be either way. Sure.
It's correct that we discuss it then, but maybe we'll ask her, what does she think if we just post on Facebook, number 1 or number 2? Which one do you like?
Right.
Because that's not a contest.
Sure. The whole thing I'm really hoping for here is we get this at a cost that's acceptable, so that the board is given what was requested in November. And so at least with an open mind, we can make an informed decision on something that's going to be part of the district likely for decades.
Elaine, what were you saying?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say I would not support going to a contest because you don't have the contestants don't have the history and all of the
all right, so
the soul of the district, so to speak.
That wasn't what I suggested anyway.
So Elaine, for now, we discussed that, but there's no direction to staff anything about a contest. Is that everybody's understanding?
Yeah.
Okay, so the only direction to staff is to ask about the price for a remix, not a brand new logo, but show some variations of the current design.
Can I just say that I also interpreted staff's interpretation the same way, so.
Chair, if I
Staff came back with what I expected, so I just want to comment on that.
Chair, if I could, just as a courtesy, we do have those that already voted. I would like to, make sure that those that voted in the majority are okay with this delay of time to get Director Abela and you the information that you're asking for. Because we do have a 4-1 that said press forward with this. So in the spirit of cooperation, I would like to, get some direction and make sure that those that were in the majority, sounds like you clearly are okay with this delay.
Are we, do you need a motion for that or just?
I thought Director O'Brien was okay with it as well.
I'm okay with it.
I just want to be clear. I'm just asking to make sure that we're good with this little delay in time. I'll take a couple weeks and come back with a quote to see what it would take to get some, I'll call it, refinement of the existing logo, let's call it.
Okay.
Given the history on this particular matter, my advice would be to put that into a motion. And perhaps the motion could be for the board to proceed as just described by the district manager, unless you're.
Delay the implementation.
If I could, Brian, I would say that we're going to delay the implementation of the December 17th decision. And we're going to come back with a price to refine the logo that was presented by the consultant.
So
Ed, would you like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
And I will second it. All those in favor of the motion, which is to delay the implementation and come back with the price?
Aye.
Aye. That is 5-0 in favor of delaying the implementation and coming back with a quote for remixing the design. That takes us to the next item on the agenda. It's new business, discussion and consideration of beekeeping in Park District Public Open Space.
Thank you, Chair. Director of Planning and Maintenance, Wayne Nakaoka, will present the report.
Chair Dennert, members of the board, over the past few years, there have been a growing interest in localized beekeeping that stems from the decline of the number of bees that pollinate and sustain agriculture in California. While some of this decline can be attributed to pollution, pesticides, and modern metropolitan expansion, the overall root cause is still unknown. Over the past 3 decades, the number of devoted pollination-dependent crops in the United States has doubled. As a result, farmers must now pay beekeepers to keep bee colonies on their fields for pollination services during critical windows when they need to pollinate their crops. These services are in high demand since wild bees can no longer be relied upon to generate profitable crop yields. This impact is also noticeable on a smaller scale where backyard garden enthusiasts are encountering fewer fruits and vegetables that need or are dependent upon pollination. The decline in the bee population has prompted the city of Simi Valley and County of Ventura to consider amendments to their local ordinances to allow some beekeeping within residential zone properties. While there are hundreds of bee species native to California, there are 3 primary bee types. One would be the bumblebee, grouped together would be the Western European honeybee, and the last would be the carpenter bee. There's a brief description of each type of bee in your staff report along with their known characteristics. While there are no known ordinances prohibiting the Park District from allowing beekeeping in public open space, the following are a few special circumstances that must be considered by the board of directors. If permitted, the beekeepers would require unmonitored access to open space to monitor and maintain their beehives. Park District staff is not trained or equipped to handle bee or beekeeping emergencies. The beehives out there in the open space will be basically unmonitored and may be subject to vandalism and theft. The beehives may be an attractive nuisance to park patrons using our public open space. And though highly unlikely, there is a possibility that beehives in our area or open space will attract the Africanized honeybees to our area. Staff requested Park District Legal Counsel to research the district's possible liability for accidents and injuries if the board elected to allow beekeeping in public open spaces. While beekeeping in district's open space areas may expose the district to claims that beekeeping constitutes a dangerous condition of public property, the district can take steps to mitigate against potential accidents attributable to beekeeping. If the board has any specific legal questions, legal counsel is available at the conclusion of this presentation to answer them. If beekeeping is allowed in the Park District's open space, staff has 4 recommendations. One, that all beehives be located a minimum of 400 feet away from the nearest habitable structure, residential dwelling unit, trail entrance, or public right-of-way. Number 2 would be that all beehives be located a minimum of 200 feet away from any Park District established trail. 3 would be that all beehives must be located within a chain link fence enclosure with lockable gates. And the 4th one would be that adequate signage be provided within 50 feet of the beehive to warn park patrons of its presence. Fiscal impact, beyond administrative costs and the occasional trip out there for a complaint, there are no significant impacts to the Park District's budget. Any associated costs for these incidents may be offset by any fee imposed by the Park District to establish beehives in the public open space. In addition to any comments or questions that the board may have, staff has provided 4 alternatives for the board's review and discussion. 1 would be consider and provide staff with direction to initiate a text amendment to the district's policy manual to permit beekeeping in Park District open space. 2 would be consider and provide staff with no direction to allow beekeeping in public open space. The 3rd is to allow the district manager to issue permits for beekeeping in Park District open space on a case-by-case basis in conformance with city and county ordinances and the Park District safety protocols. The other one is provide direction to staff if you'd like anything else. Staff recommends alternative number 3 at this time. And the Park District's legal counsel and district staff is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Chair, I'd like to remind you, I do have a public comment on this item.
Yes, please.
Not now, but when you're ready. Now's good.
Public comment is now though, correct? If there's anybody on the call.
From David E. Ross from Oak Park. He said, regarding agenda item 9A, would the district's liability be reduced if the beekeeper were required to maintain liability insurance of a significant amount with the district as an additional named insured? If this is possible, then I would recommend approving the placing of beehives on different district open space properties. In that case, signage as suggested in the staff report should include identification and contact information of the beekeeper. Again, from David Ross, Oak Park.
Is there anybody else that from the public that would like to comment? Dan, you could give me a direction on this. I remember the public was on the call earlier. I know she wanted to comment on it. I'm just going to call her up and see if she could get back on the Zoom.
Oh, earlier in this meeting?
Yes.
Brian.
I saw she was on the call. She dropped off. We had a long discussion earlier. I'm going to just dial her up and see if she wants to join back on. It looks like she is. She just messaged me, okay. So are we allowed to do public? If she's probably trying to sign on to Zoom right now, we wait for her and have a brief recess, or should we?
It's the chair has the latitude to delay public comment until the person's available. So we can continue the discussion and then you can stop the meeting and have the individual comment if they would like to do that.
Chair Dennard,
Yes.
I'd just like to follow up, because I have the same question as Mr. Ross. If we could get liability insurance and hold harmless agreements with them as part of their permit process.
We can do that if that's the direction of the board would require that. And yeah, and as Director Nakaoka mentioned, would require some kind of fee for the use of the public space too.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do every time somebody has an event at one of our parks, we have them sign a hold harmless and all of that.
If someone came to staff, if it were a staff decision that's still being decided, we would treat it similar to anybody else that was using our property, and it would have the same conditions and requirements in addition to the conditions that Wayne has mentioned that are included in the report.
Right.
What type of fees would that?
I mean, I think it should be a staff decision with all of the conditions that were proposed by staff.
I just had one thing. If it is a staff decision, does the board want to cap how many of these staff has the authority to do? You know what I mean? So do we allow 3? Do we allow 5? Do we allow 10?
Well, how do we come to that determination? We without more information, how do we just picking a number out of a hat? What would we be basing the number
I
on?
think the basis is what the board is comfortable with, giving the district manager the discretion to permit. So I don't think it's.
Well, how do we know what to be comfortable with, though?
I would say that if you get applications for multiple beekeeping sites, that you bring us an update. I mean, if you're getting inundated with sites.
Keep you posted on what the applications we do.
Before we have any more discussion, I see the member of the public that wished to comment. That's Linda. Join the Zoom. Linda, are you there?
I think she's still connecting to audio, so she wouldn't hear us.
Right. So Linda needs to connect to her audio. I apologize, Josh, you were about to speak.
Yeah, I think my question may aid in eventually providing an answer to Ed's as well. I guess the question is, did staff encounter space kind of constraints, and did staff encounter any zones that were ideal to this? That I think it would be silly if we don't have an idea of the zones that would be ideal for this or would be convenient. We're already coming up with restrictions on how many feet between structures, between our trails. Did staff encounter zones that would work, or do we have any concept of how much space we are opening up for this? I know nothing about beekeeping, so I don't know. I'm assuming they're sensitive to.
Yeah.
Dan, answer that question in a minute, but I see that Linda is now connected. Linda, if you have public comment on beekeeping, unmute yourself and speak. Lee, if you could click the button that says request to unmute.
I did that. Okay, I'm sorry. My phone is very notorious for being bad, so I apologize that it decided to die right before I was supposed to join in and everything. Okay, yes, I had several thoughts in mind about everything. Number one, about beekeeping being unmonitored, the vandalism, the nuisance to patrons, and Africanized bees. I wanted to address all of that if that's okay with you. Is that okay with you?
You might want to choose some of that because I believe she has 3 minutes. Is that correct? So you have 3 minutes. So maybe choose, okay. We'll go over all that in our comments, but maybe choose the most important. Go ahead.
Okay. My husband and I, we've kept bees up in the Park District for over 2 years now. We have not been monitored by anyone. We have not experienced any vandalism. We've experienced a few people complaining of bee stings, excuse me. And you might be aware of this or not, but there are plenty of Africanized bees up in your area. One thing that we do constantly is that we requeen our bees so that there is a minimal amount of Africanized bees in our colonies. And when an Africanized hive moves into our apiary, when we requeen a hive, which means that we take and we kill the Africanized queen, we say down with the queen, we kill that bee queen as an unfortunate thing, and then we replace it with a European queen. That means all the drones that go up into the air to mate with the existing queens that are mating at that time are going to be European. So all the existing queens in that area, if you follow the science, are going to become more European. So you might say that the genetics are going to become more European as it goes along. I can't give you the exact data on it, but right now 95% of the feral bees in Ventura County are Africanized. The beekeeping is very important for the area. We managed to put a lot of the our bees. We have over 20 hives. We managed to send 10 of our hives to almonds, which was, when you think there's about 20,000 plus bees in per hive going into pollinate all those almond trees, it's a significant impact. And then they moved on to the orange groves after that. So we did a significant contribution to help pollinate food this last year with our apiary. Any more questions?
Pause the timer only because you have 3 minutes. So you have about a minute left. And when you joined, we had already discussed something. And I didn't know if you had caught it and if you had comment on that, which is one of our suggestions from staff was to require a 6-foot fence around the beehives. And another suggestion was that possibly you would have insurance that would also name the park district to reduce our liability. Do you have any comments on those two things?
Well, the plot of land that we have our bees on is independently owned away from the park district. So I would suggest that you maybe look towards getting people to do that, to get independent landowners to take the liability rather than having it be on the park district. So to clear you of all that liability. The chain link fence is probably a great idea because you don't want the vandalism. We've never had a problem with vandalism, but that I know of a friend that did have his hives vandalized, and it was very destructive. I was very interested in the sign that you mentioned because I actually requested that we could put a sign up to warn people about our bees being in the area, because I think somebody that is allergic to bees might want to know that they're coming across bees. But generally, people stand about 100 yards away, and they don't get bothered by our bees. They actually a lot of times want to get closer, and they're still not bothered by our bees.
Linda, thank you. So what we're doing now is the board has time for questions and comments. And then there's a board report that you could read through if you'd like, because we might vote on this tonight. Elaine, I believe it was you that brought it to our attention. Elaine, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Elaine.
Can we get an answer to Josh's question?
Oh, yes. I apologize. Josh, can you restate your question?
Sure. In a kind of paraphrased way, did staff encounter any zones that would be ideal for this? Because we've already brought up that there's feet restrictions from structures, from trailheads, trails. So I don't want to approve something and then there actually isn't any space in which to land these people. And I think by having that information, we also then can answer Ed's question of how many permits should we be giving out is dependent upon how much space there is, territory, and counter uses that we have planned for other things as well.
Wayne, is that a question for you?
I'm so sorry. May I interject something, please? It's super important.
Linda, I apologize, but the structure of our meeting doesn't allow for more than that. If there's any other member of the public, like another member of your family that was interested in this, if they join, they also get their 3 minutes.
Okay.
And I just want to say, Josh asked that much more articulately or eloquently than I could have, so I appreciate that.
To answer Josh's question, the answer is yes. All of our open space areas would conform to the protocols that I've listed there. We can set the beehives away from the homes. It would be way in the back of the canyons. They could be put off the side of the trail by 200 feet. We might have to assist the beekeeper a little bit and grade him a little path of travel. They can put their fences up in there. We have a lot of open space. I don't know how close beehives can be next to each other and live, but even if you put one in each zone of the open space, we have Chivos Canyon, Las Yajas Canyon, we got the Wood Ranch open space. We have 4 different open space regions in Oak Park. We also have Tapple Canyon. We also have the with the Parker Ranch open space. So those are the open spaces I can just list off the top of my head that would conform to the areas or the protocols I've listed. So if a beekeeper had one in each one, that's about 8 or 9 beehives or bee colonies, multiple boxes I'm talking. That could be
So
established in each area.
Wayne, based on that, are you recommending that we do cap or that we do not cap it at some number?
We are going to have to cap it. I was hoping that you leave it to the discretion of the district manager. So when he does get a request, he can come to me and then we can talk about where the beehives are going to be located so I can situate them in a safe location and be sure that we're meeting all the protocols in county and city ordinances. If you elect to put more than one beehive in an open space, you probably could. I'm talking one open space is listed open space, Las Yajas Canyon or Chivos Canyon. I believe Linda's beehive is currently in Chivos Canyon. I could be wrong. It might be Las Yajas Canyon. It's on private property.
You would recommend leaving it to you and the district manager essentially to.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then Elaine, I apologize, but my question for you is, you brought this to our attention. What inspired that?
I was at a meeting and there was a big discussion with some city people and beekeepers and where open space could be used, and they asked me to bring it. And they were sent a copy of the staff report tonight too. So I thought that they might be on here, but I guess they're not. But that's how it came about, just through a discussion.
I have a question for Elaine and for Dan both. And Wayne also. Do we have any sense of actually how many applications, if we go ahead with this, how many applications we could expect, say, in the next 6 months?
I don't. My sense is maybe 1 or 2, maybe.
Oh. Okay, so the space issue might not even be it.
Because it is a financial investment for them too.
Okay.
So, to do that.
That brings me to, just as a reminder, because this is not a traditional structure of meeting because we're not in person. Normally we would just look around the room. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to speak? Linda, I know that you're on the call, but if there's another member of your household, they can also speak. Linda, is that the case at all?
Yeah, I just was going to say, on the placement of the hives, it's important to make sure that they're away from swimming pools and structures that are highly trafficked by children and public facilities like that. We've had bad experiences with that.
So we could add that, Linda, thank you. We can add that as a request of staff. We already have that it'd be away from structures, but it's 200 feet from any structure. Maybe it's 400 feet if there's a pool in the area.
Yeah, we've had awful experiences with pools. There's nothing that gets people more agitated or angry if there's a pool in the area that they get the bees into the pool.
All right. So other questions or comments from board members? Josh?
Yeah, so I will add a comment that I really do like this idea. My questions are not critical of it was more of the method and making sure that we've thought this out and it's going to be applicable and helpful and beneficial to the community. I do like that. And I would also encourage, it sounds like it would be a good idea for staff to manage some of it, but I would also encourage thoughtful consideration of an abandonment policy. That I don't think our problem based off these guidelines is going to be the people we give permits to, the permits are too close to locations, but that they make an investment, then it's abandoned, or there's a misuse in how they manage it. And then we have feral hives expanding throughout the community. And while it may be good for nature, we should have a thoughtful policy on abandonment and misuse, misguidance on how they use their permits and how they go about this.
Josh, after I speak, if you could think of how to put that into a motion or as a part of the motion, let me know. I support-
Chair,
Yes.
I just want to say, I once again, I agree with everything that Director Gray just said. I support this, but with the comment that Director Gray made, I have a daughter who does the beekeeping thing, and so yeah, I echo I think she's right on the money on all of this. So just wanted to mention that. 100%.
So I support this for a variety of reasons. It's supports local agriculture and farmers in our region in California because the bees will move. Like we raise them here, but my understanding of beehives is they're more well-traveled than most of us. They go around the country, a few weeks at each farm sometimes, and they get on a truck, and although the bees die off, the hive lives, and they go to the Pacific Northwest and the Southeast. So that promotes farming in America. It's good for local jobs. It's a service because even though it's them using Park District land, it's good for local farmers, and it's also good for people that grow food in their yard. And it also provides local food, like honey that we know where it came from and how it was done. I know there are some beehives in Las Yajas. If you go to the bottom of the the asphalt road to the right, and there is no fence around it. And the reason I mention it is that I know of, and Dan will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not hearing complaints about it. And it's right there in Las Yajas. And if you've been there, you probably walked right past it. There are signs, and as Linda mentioned, there's even water there for the bees with little islands in there so the bees could get the water and not drown. So if you could walk right up to it and see it. Now there are signs, don't go in it for safety, but it's just right there at Las Yajas without a fence. So for staff, I have a question about a fence. Who brought that suggestion? And the reason I ask is I'm thinking our open space, does a fence look kind of ugly? Or is it really necessary? Like, is the fence for public safety or to protect the beehive investment? Because if it's to protect their investment, well, that's on them if they want to protect their investment. But if it's public safety, that might be different. Wayne, the fence idea, where did that come from?
That's just something that I came up with. I put that in there for public safety, primarily just to keep people away from the area if they got close to it. They'd read the signs on the fence, and plus the signs are 50 feet away. I'm not an expert on bees, and I know that bees often attack people or people get stung. I was just trying to limit the amount of stinging that gets put out there, and also the consideration of theft and vandalism.
Dan?
Yeah, just to follow up on the issue of the stinging, you referenced it. We did have, and it's kind of an extreme example, but up in Las Yajas, probably 6 months ago, we had a gentleman that got stung and went into, I don't know how to, anaphylactic shock. And he called here 2 times extremely angry that the bees were there. Now, in this case, it's again on independent property, but he did throw out, he was threatening us with, legal action and those kind of things. And he was very upset that we allowed bees next to the trail, just a piece of information because you asked, but it's been 1 and 2 years since I've been here. And it sounded like it was a pretty serious sting that he received on our trail.
Specifically about the fence requirement, do any other board members have comment just on requiring a fence? The reason I'm asking is it's a beehive. There's already a bunch of signs. Don't go touch the beehive. Like, will it make our property distract from the natural beauty, or is it good for public safety?
Well, my concern about fences, if we have too many beehives up with too many fences, it's not going to be open space anymore. We're going to have, if you know what I mean, it's the row upon row of chain link fences is not really open space. That's my concern. On the other hand, if it's a safety issue, well, if we have signs up saying "Don't annoy the bees" or do, I don't know, maybe that would suffice if they're 400 feet away from the trails.
I mean, why anybody would bother the bees is an interesting question in itself. So.
If I could just wait, I mean, in the extreme, you could have a 12, 13-year-old kid up there and they're having kind of fun and they go over there and get close to the hives and start messing around with them. So I think Wayne was thinking that a fence would prevent that from happening. Not to say, pro-conning it. I think that was Wayne's thought, is you would avoid that potentially. But Is
Wayne,
that-
when I was 14, I would have definitely walked right through the middle of that. So I understand. And then Wayne, I like the way that the report was written, and then the part and importance, including the different types of bees. I just want to give credit to that. Who wrote the report?
I did.
Very good report.
That's
You
good.
even have carpenter bees in there, so I'm impressed.
Yeah, I learned about bees. I didn't know that there were how many bees there were, how many different kinds of bees that there are. That was interesting.
So as a part of the motion, I would like to add to it that the sign also include not just don't do this, watch out, there's bees, but the sign explain the importance of bees.
That'd be
I'm
helpful.
going to add that to the motion. So the public, if they see a beehive, they're like, why is the park district allowing this? They could use the wording from this report or their own wording that the importance of the pollinators, like we had a pollinator blitz in September. These pollinators are put here to support agriculture, local farmers and gardens, and bees are threatened right now, like beehive extinction.
Was that option 3 plus your signage?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the option and just adding that they will include a sign. Then one more part to that, that we're going to increase it anywhere there's a pool. Linda's suggestion. So we have a 200 feet, I believe, from a structure.
Oh, it's 400 feet from habitable structure,
Okay, so
200 feet from our existing trails that are used and marked.
right.
Chain link fence around it, that's at the discretion. You can put it as small as you want as long as it's fenced in. And the other recommendation I had was signage 50 feet away from the beehive or bee colony.
Okay. I think we should increase the footage away from 400 if there's a pool. And the reasoning for that is Linda mentioned that creates complaints and we want the public to be happy. And there's other places they could do it. So Wayne, what do you think? Should we increase it to a specific foot number?
You can if you like. 400 feet from habitable structure, I can put 400 feet from pools too.
All right, so 400 feet from habitable structures, and what do you think, 800 feet if there's a pool? 800 feet, pretty far. Like, I don't know if people are picturing that. That's a couple blocks over.
800 feet, yeah, that's actually kind of a lot.
Wayne, what do you think? Should we increase it 600? Specifically,
I don't have any recommendation on how far you would like it. Ed might be able to tell me a little more.
I can't, no, I can't tell you.
I figured since your daughter kept bees away from water, so.
It may be an appropriate question. It may be an appropriate question from Linda, our bee expert on the line.
Linda, you mentioned specifically pools cause complaints. Linda, do you have a suggestion how far away it should be? We already have, it has to be 400 feet away from a house.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that's excellent. I would like to get Matt's input on it if you have just a second. Matt, this is super important. Can you run in here, please? Give me he's the one that had the real problem with the bees, because he was one that had to, during the hot season, he had to haul up water every day, like when it was like 103-degree weather, to keep this lady happy. When we had our bees up First Street on top of this hill, talk to these people about bees. Not please, it's a board. They're listening to you. Bees,
Matt.
how close bees should be to the they're talking about 400.
Matt, this is board chair Brian Dennert. Can you hear me? Matt, we have a specific question for you.
Okay.
We're considering that there'd be a policy that any beehives on Park District land would have to be 400 feet from a habitable structure. But my question for you is, should we expand that if there's a pool? Because I've heard that pools cause a complaint. So should we say 400 feet from a habitable structure, but 600 to 800 if there's a pool?
I think the regulation needs to be that if they have bees, they've got to keep it watered. 800 feet ain't gonna matter. They have to have the bees watered.
Because otherwise bees are gonna go look for water?
Yes.
Okay, we could put that in there that they must maintain it properly, including water. Thank you, Matt.
Hey, that, you did a good job, Matt.
Thank you.
I like
So
my
just-
idea. I like my idea, but your idea, you're the bee expert.
That's why we call in bee experts.
Yeah, so he knows a little bit more than me, so I'm glad he finally came by, so.
So I'm looking at the staff report and adding to it a sign that includes the importance of bees, and proper maintenance must be required. And Wayne, that's water specifically. So we should probably put proper maintenance, including water, because that's what caused them to go search. And then we have proper fencing. And we could leave that up to Wayne's discretion if it needs to be 6 feet tall, but proper fencing.
Or if I could, did we get consensus on fencing? Some indicated they didn't want a fence and some did they did. I wasn't sure if we had a consensus on no fencing or fencing.
I'm on the fence because, I mean, for the reasons I stated.
No pun intended.
Don't speak.
So,
Yeah, I think
I can't beat that.
I think chain link fencing is appropriate.
Fence or no fence?
Fence.
Okay, yeah, okay, fence, no.
Josh, Ed, any thoughts on fences?
I mean, I would want to minimize fencing as much as to restricting to only what is needed. I would hate for open spaces to be, I enjoy hiking. I like going through our hills. I think it's great if there's beehives there and we're nurturing that for businesses and for nature. But I also don't want to look at chain link fences. But I think that would also come back to the discretion of how these, how permits are given. And so.
Okay.
Right, I kind of agree. I don't know that I would put any wording in on it other than if it needs to happen, but I would be wanting to minimize it too. I just didn't want to be the first one to say that because I don't always want to be the one causing trouble.
Minimize the amount of fencing.
We could say at the discretion of staff, fencing may be required. Are we good with
Sometimes
that?
it's location too, like that background that Josh has with that mustard plant. Sometimes you can put a 4-foot fence in there and it's all covered with the mustard, but it keeps the kids out. So maybe it's a location by location basis, depending on how it looks visually.
So discretion of
I would say only as the staff determines is needed.
Okay. And then the last
Sheriff,
part
yeah,
we
go
hadn't
ahead.
addressed was, should we require insurance? Any thoughts on that?
I think we should, in my opinion,
We should.
given our experience.
I
And,
think so too.
yeah. And we require it of anybody using our space, so I think we should. And
So that
Chair, I
brings
had
us
one
to-
more, Director Gray, I'm sorry. Director Gray mentioned the issue of abandonment.
Right, I was going to bring that up too.
A couple tools, we can require deposit. So if it is abandoned, we can hire a beekeeper to go clean it up. We could also issue the permit in increments, say 1-year permit, and they have to come get it renewed. So then we know it's not abandoned. Wayne, any more suggestions on how to deal with either if it is abandoned, our requirement to clean it up, or to make sure so that we can monitor that it is abandoned or not?
I think that's part of our normal permit process, that we put in a clause that they say they have to clean the site after they leave the site to our satisfaction. So even though they may take the beehives to pollinate the almond trees for a couple of months, they would have to clean up the site. They probably could leave the chain link fence there, but anything that you use for water or supplies up there, they'd have to remove. Then they
What
can
happens
do
if they don't, Wayne, and they just leave?
then we could require a small deposit. I'd
Right.
love to have their chain link fence, so.
I was thinking a deposit. If it's going to be more costly for them to open, but we'd have something that we.
I don't know that we need to specify in the motion how. As long as we specify that there's some sort of policy to account for the abandonment situation.
Yeah.
And I would also tack on not just abandoned, but also mishandled. That if the apiary expands beyond the permitted zone, they also forfeit. That I think both can lead to the same end result.
And normally with an issue like this, Wayne, let's say we have a policy, someone gets a permit, they put up some beehives and some neighbors complain. do we just say they have a permit, or do we say maybe the permit user needs to move?
No, we actually go out there. One of the grounds maintenance supervisors is in charge of that area. We go out there and check out the situation and talk with the resident about the bees. If there is a problem that he notices, we could request that the beekeeper relocate his hive further back into the open space.
So as Dan mentioned earlier, the person that complained, we could just say, all right, to satisfy that specific member of the public because they had a concern, you could just tell them to move, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that sounds like number 3, to restate the motion. Board action, I apologize. Board action number 3, allow the district manager to issue permits for beekeeping, public open space on a case-by-case basis, following city and county ordinances and park district safety protocols. Adding to that, the requirement for insurance, proper maintenance, including water, abandonment or maintenance issues. That sounds like that we have a motion for that.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
And Josh seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. So that's 5-0. Before we move on to the next item, Dan, I'm going to request that we issue a press release to inform the public about this when we're prepared. And as a part of that press release, I would like to have a quote in there because this is important to me, and a quote from Elaine because Elaine brought this to our attention.
Thank
Is
you.
there any feedback on that?
Yes, we will do that.
Okay.
We'll probably time it a little more when Wayne gets the permit conditions together. So I don't know.
That sounds good.
That might be next
the
2 or
only
3 weeks or so.
Okay, that's good. That brings us to new business item B, approval of award of contract for the Oak Park post and cable fire damaged replacement project.
Director of Planning and Maintenance, Wayne Nakaoka, will present the report.
Chair Demmer, members of the board, on November 4th, 2020, the board of directors authorized staff to solicit bids for the Oak Park fire damage post and cable replacement project. This project is basically, as you know, to replace all the burnt down post and cable within the Oak Park area as a result of the Wolseley fire. A notice of inviting bids was published in Ventura County Star on November 8th, 2020. A total of 7 contractors picked up plans for the project. At the time of the bid opening, on December 8th, we did receive 3 proposals. The lowest apparent responsive bidder is Ardalon Construction. I think we're all familiar with Ardalon Construction. They've done a lot of projects for the Park District. They've always done great work for the Park District. Based upon that, allowing for a 10% construction contingency of $22,900 onto the base contract of $229,000 would bring us up to $251,900. Currently in the budget under the disaster account fund, we have $200,000. So any additional funds to cover the shortfall for this project can be relocated from the SCE fire proceeds. It should be noted that the estimate that we gave their insurance company initially to get the $200,000 was a little short from what the actual burnt down post and cable fence is in Oak Park. We missed a few sections on a few streets, which got picked up during the design process. We could request our insurance carrier to cover these costs at the end of the project. And I'm specifying at the end of the project because that way I'll have a total cost for the entire project. At this time, staff is requesting board action. 1, to award a contract for the post and cable fire damage replacement project to Ardalon Construction in the amount of $229,000. Authorize the district manager to execute an agreement on behalf of the Park District and to amend the agreement for project contingencies or change orders in the amount not exceeding $22,900. And 3rd, authorize the district manager to amend the contract budget to include an appropriation of an additional $51,900 from the SCE fire proceeds. Sorry, my tongue is all tied right now.
Wayne, if I could just clarify that a bit, I expect that this will be out of insurance proceeds. So it is the fire account, but remember we have 3 reimbursement sources there. We have FEMA, we have insurance, and we have Edison. Now, I believe that the post and cable, because it's a man-made structure, will be covered by the insurance, not necessarily Edison. To the extent that insurance doesn't cover 100% of it, the Edison funds would be used in second position, so to speak. But this one, I think the insurer is planning to cover.
I have some questions about this, but first, it was at an Oak Park meeting when we were discussing fencing, and I hadn't really thought a lot about fencing. When a member of the Oak Park committee or Oak Park community didn't like the plastic fencing and specifically asked about the poles, and then we discussed the difficulty of finding them. Is this that's the importance of public comment, like why we go slow and make sure that they could speak. And what I didn't realize is the fencing symbolizes something. Like not everybody uses a telephone pole cable fencing, and it's supposed to symbolize to the public that's open space. It belongs to you. And you might drive down the road and it's not a park exactly, but it's your open space. But does most of this follow the same like old telephone pole style?
Yes, it does. The Oak Park Committee requested the Park District put back exactly what was burnt down last January.
Wayne, didn't they select, because we couldn't use poles, that we were going to use cedar poles, not necessarily old telephone poles?
A cedar pole and the telephone poles, yes, they're different. Cedar is going to be used because we can't get used telephone poles, but they look exactly the same. They're round, untreated poles.
So they don't have creosote, or I don't know how to say it, the chemical in the old poles?
Creosote. No, they do not have creosote on them.
They do not?
They do not.
Okay. And then, Dan, you mentioned the source of the funding and the possible sources. That doesn't change our motion tonight. Like no matter what, one of those sources is covering it.
Yeah, but I do need authority to amend the budget and increase it by the amount identified in the staff report.
That's it for me. Any other comments or motions?
I move that we move 1, 2, and 3 in the staff report. We authorize Dan to do the.
I'll second it.
Dan, is that good with you as far as what you had just suggested?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Elaine, you were in favor?
Yes. I
So that's
second the
five.
motion. Okay.
That makes sense. That's 5-0 in favor of approving that contract.
Thank you.
That brings us to written communications of note.
We got another item,
Ask
Chair.
each one of you individually, but usually you tell me you don't have any. So
We have another item. Chair, we have another item.
oh, I apologize. Approval of 2021 Board of Directors committee list.
Thank you, Board and Chair. Each year at this time, we look at our committee list and make new assignments. I work with each of the board members to get their preferences, and then it's the discretion of the chair on who gets appointed, who gets at least proposed for those committees. The chair and I did meet and developed the list that's attached to your report. And with that, I'll turn it over to the chair and the board.
So board members, do you have any questions or comments on the proposed? And I say proposed, if you have feedback, committee list, Josh?
Yeah, I had a question for, I guess, both the chair and staff. On the website, it lists an additional 4 committees. And I just wanted to clarify that those committees exist or were disbanded or will be removed from the website, and what the status of that may be.
That's a good catch. Thank you for catching that. I'll ask the staff, Teresa, if we can remove, those were disbanded last year, eliminated from the list. So we'll have to update the website.
Okay.
And before we get into discussion though, these are just questions and then we're gonna go to a public comment. Any other questions about it? Josh?
Would now be the time if I wanted to propose a new committee?
And a little bit. I think we'd wait to see if there's any public comment.
Okay.
Are there any members of the public that would like to comment? Dan, looking around at who's on the call, is there even a member of the public? I'm looking at LM2. I see Kelly as a staff member. Brian's iPhone, is that our attorney, Brian?
Do we call Mr. Johnson a member of the public or?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I hope
Mr.
so.
Johnson is on. Yes, he's a member of the public.
Okay. Are there,
I don't see any others other than Mark. It all looks like staff at this point to me.
Mark, do you have any comment on the proposed committees?
You have Mr. Gray, Josh as CRPD. Josh, you did tell him that you have to run for that office to become a member. The Park District has been on CRPD or Capri for the last 35 years. Someone has always been there. Right now, there's two open positions on that. To run it at my position, there's a 1-year extension on the odd year. And then the even years will come at our next April meeting. So you'd have to talk to Matt Doherty and see what the board's going to do. Usually at this time in the past, when there's only 4 months to go before our normal conference, we will not appoint anybody of the 11-member board. We will usually just wait till then to let the whole entire, 87 members vote. So you're on the CRPD board from the Park District, but you still have to run for at large at the board meeting. Just to let you know that.
Okay.
And all their meetings are in Sacramento, although we have gone to Zoom for everything in the past. So be aware of that.
Okay. I appreciate the info. That's helpful.
Just for you, so that you'll know, CRPD 4 years ago, they will pay your expense to fly up there and fly back and go to the conference and everything as well. At least they pay for your travel if you choose to do that. To let you know so. But if you need any other information, let me know.
Will do. Thank you, Mark.
Josh, I would expect if you do join, not the board, that's a possibility, but if you're that part of that committee, you're definitely going to call up Mark and ask him some questions because he knows a lot about CRPD.
Yeah.
It took me a while just to figure out all the letters that people throw around because Mark was so good at it. He threw out letters so quickly at me. I nodded along and took notes and looked them up later.
I think that's where my experience in DC will help me. Everything's an acronym there, even if you're just trying to order a water.
Are there any other comments? Are there any other comments from board members on the proposed committees? Josh, that could also be a proposed committee.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I would propose, or at least I'd want to hear comment from the board if there's any interest in the creation or existence of a film committee to be more involved in that. Recently, the district, I would say, has had numerous successes. Our community has successes in bringing fantastic companies to the area. And I would want to capitalize on that and looked at the question of how do we grow that, that I think it adds prestige to our community and it can potentially bring in greater revenue.
So possibilities is we create a committee and then we discuss creating a committee, choose if we're going to create it and then choose 2 members of that committee. And another possibility is we look at the existing committees and say, where does it fit in?
Okay.
So maybe we'll discuss that first. Does it fit into any of our current committees? So Josh, if I'm understanding you correctly, you want to work to promote our parks as a place to film.
Correct.
And the committee would discuss that. And then possibly the partnership or discussing with the school district and the city, how we work together on that.
Yes.
Anybody have ideas for, does it fit into a current committee?
Chair, can I ask a couple clarifying questions?
Yes.
Josh, are you envisioning this as an ongoing effort or just a one-time effort to get updated on what we're currently doing and maybe put a plan in place to expand? Or do you envision this as an ongoing effort that staff reports to the committee on progress and it's a living, breathing thing versus like a one-time effort to put a plan in place?
I do think a living, breathing thing could be more beneficial over the long term. I would be open though if we did a one-time report and then based on that information, then see if a committee would be helpful for staff and for the district in ideas and policy going forward.
Do we still have a staff person doing outreach and coordinating with the film people?
Yes, we do. We've got Nikki Davy is dedicated to that. And I think I reported to the board, I think it was about 2 months ago. We're doing a pretty darn good job on getting more filming and that's going on. And we also, we had some communication with the chamber and I think the Big Sky Movie Ranch on that front about 1.5 years ago. I just want to note, and I'm sure everybody notes this, there's a yin and yang with the filming because there are folks that view filming as a conflict with their house or their street or anything like that. So while on one hand, we want to promote it and do it and, you know, generate revenue for the good of the community, there is a yin and yang with the impacts that filming has on neighborhoods and such.
Mhm. And that's where I think staff could be, where a committee could be helpful, where it sounds like it's a policy and a debate there and a balance there.
Mm-hmm.
My only comment on that is my position on committees is as far as policy decisions, all of that should go in front of the board anyway. I don't believe 2 people making a policy decision for the rest of the board. And as far as interacting with the city, I believe even though it's sort of bogged down during COVID, we have a mechanism for doing that, correct, Dan?
Yes, we're in communication. To be fair to Mr. Gray, I don't know if there is a cohesive group that is regularly communicating about, you know, improvements and expansion,
right,
things like that. But we do communicate, yes.
Well, if I could add, there is a group, it's called Film Simi Valley, and Nikki Davy participates in this group on a regular basis. So she could provide some information, work with Laura to provide maybe a report, so you could get an update on what our involvement currently is. This group has become fairly active. They put out a really nice brochure, and it is being utilized through this group, which is called Film Simi Valley. So we could update you on that as well.
Josh, I'm open to the idea of a committee. But before that, would this meet your goal? You meet with Nikki to get briefed on what we're currently doing. And possibly if you choose, you can request it to be an agenda item with proposed policies. And then as Ed asked, then the whole board could review the proposed policies. Would that meet what you're trying to do?
Yeah, it would. I think it would get me the information I'm looking for and yeah, would empower me to make.
And that's different than the staff presenting what they're currently doing, because maybe you'll research what needs to be done and ask us if we should do it. Or maybe there's something the staff wants to do, but they don't currently have a policy. So we'll debate or discuss a new policy.
Sure.
Would that work? Maybe just putting it under advanced or special event. Brian and Josh are on that committee, special event. Would that expand to include
advanced planning too? Because if we know we have a filming coming up, we're going to be it's going to go to advanced planning anyway. So,
I mean, maybe there's a way to expand one of those 2 committees to cover it.
And that means it could be discussed in a variety of committees. It sounds like, but maybe from here, Josh does some research, meets with staff, and proposes an agenda item. Does that sound good?
Right.
All right.
Chair, just to clarify, so what I'm hearing is we're going to spend some time with Josh to let him know what we are currently doing, what our partnerships are, and what our efforts currently are. And after Josh learns that, he would propose bringing an item back to the board to discuss whether or not we should form a committee or use an existing committee to advance the policy effort.
Correct. And maybe he'll bring to us suggestions for policies. Maybe no policies are needed.
Right. He can also choose not to have it go as a committee either. Because again, a policy decision should go to the whole board.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for, is to determine policy.
Right. Of course.
That brings us to anybody else a question on the proposed policies before I speak?
So Chair, I was going to wait till board member comments to do this.
Committees. Yes.
I am going to bring up something, but I don't really intend this as a, I don't really intend, Kate may really think she's having sound trouble when she hears this, that I'm actually proposing another committee, but I'm only proposing a temporary committee. I'm not even necessarily proposing it. It's something I'd like the district manager to look into or consider. In other words, I don't know exactly where I stand on this, but I did have a meeting with the mayor several weeks ago, and discussing a number of topics related to Park District, not related to Park District. And one of the things he told me is that when the city did their hiring of the assistant city manager, am I getting the title right? That the two of the city council members were included in the interview process for the assistant city manager. And I would like to at least have the district manager consider whether that would be a wise way to go, to have one or two board members as part of the interview process for the next director of recreation, since that is an executive management position. I would never suggest it for anything lower than that, but for the executive management positions, I think it would be good both from an input standpoint and a transparency standpoint. Having said that, you know, I've only looked at it from the positives, the fact that the city did it for their position. You know, I'd like at least the district manager to consider it. There could be negatives to that process as well. So I'm not proposing that tonight. I'm throwing that out there. And if it needs to be part of an agenda item at one of our next couple meetings, we can do that, or the district manager can return with it as part of a board member report. But I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I just want there to be some consideration. I think it could be a good idea, because I know, at least in my case, I do deal with the executive management staff quite a bit, and it is an important decision for us in the future of this district. So it seems like any additional input or any additional aid in the process would certainly be helpful. But at the same time, I want the district manager to reflect on the concept before we discuss it any further.
I can do that.
Thank you.
As far as what our policies allow, if we proposed such a committee, the final decision would still be yours. Is that correct? Or is there?
I think that's part of the consideration. There's actually a different form of government. I don't mean to, there's actually a city administrator form of government where the board actually selects the department heads. So that's one extreme, where the board has the authority, and it's a recognized type of government. It's different than what we do. Just off the top of my head, the question is, what if there's disagreement, right? Those kind of things. And again, I would like some time to contemplate it. I appreciate that, Ed. So there's pros and cons to all of it. And there's, is it one time? Is it ongoing? Is it, who has the ultimate decision? Those kind of things. So, but I do appreciate the time to give it a think it through in the context of the project.
Well, the reason I want, just so it's clear, Dan, I understand that. I think we have an understanding that at the end of the day, the decision is ultimately your decision. But I know that in other interviews, there's usually a panel that is part of the interview process and advisory. And that's where I believe it could be an aid. I'm not trying to change the way the final decision is made. So I just want to make that clear. The intent would be to aid in the process and to be advisory. I know at a minimum, I would at least like to be an observer because I want to see what we're getting to. But in terms of actually participating in the process, I know there could be some potential negatives, and so I would like to get input from you. Are the district manager, and the way we've done it is you're going to be making the decision. But I know that the way you've conducted other interviews for non-executive staff positions, I know you've done it by way of panel. I'm certain you would do that here, and that's why I was making the suggestion. So, but again, I'd like to hear from you on that first, and have time for you to contemplate that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple comments on our committee structure, or our proposed committees. For the Oak Park Committee, some items that you might be dealing with is, I will forward it to the district manager to give to you, but a member of the Oak Park Committee noticed that we celebrate Christmas, and they definitely feel that we should include other holidays, and I agree. So that might come before the committee, or maybe staff will handle that. And maybe we already are, or we have updated that. And I understand in the current situation, it would have been hard to do, but that's one issue. And then another issue that might come before the Oak Park Committee is in reviewing the guidelines for our advisory committee and its structure. I don't see any language that says an advisory board member must be 18 or older. So
if I could comment on that, because you did ask that to be on the Oak Park Committee agenda. So we have, I guess it's three levels of communication. One is we have what we call the Oak Park Guidelines, Committee Guidelines. And it's a document, it's about 1.5 pages, and it talks generally about how the committee is formed and who's on it and who's eligible for it. In that particular document, it doesn't talk about an age requirement. Larry, or the former district manager, had a what I would call policies and procedures document, like how nuts and bolts we go about the election and implement the guidelines that the board approved. And in there, it does say that we require the person to be 18 years of age. And again, that's policies and procedures. I mean, procedures, not necessarily the guidelines. And then we have been advertising it as you have to be 18 years of age. So just by way of background, I would say based on it being in the policy and our practice, I think the expectation now is that it is 18 from a policy perspective. Obviously, if the board wants to change that and not require that, we can. I did follow up with the attorney, and he said he doesn't see, because they're not making decisions, they're making recommendations to the board. He didn't see why the person had to be 18 to participate in that, or over 18 to participate in that committee.
So for the members of the Oak Park Committee, I'm not suggesting one way or another, but listening to the residents of Oak Park, maybe it could be a youth advisory member, just like there's a member of the MAC, or there's a member of the school board. Maybe there's a young person. Or it could be, maybe they're gonna say, why do they need to be 18? It's an advisory committee. But discuss that it could be a member, an advisor, just like the other committee members, whether it's elected or appointed. But have that discussion with them to find out what their feedback is. And then my next item is for the Historical Society. I appreciate your passion for the Historical Society, and there's opportunities for partnerships with schools. But that partnership with school, I know right now it seems bad that they wouldn't be able to come tour Strather Park. That's probably the best way. But there's also value in virtual tours, because touring Strather Park involves a few hours, transportation, permission slips, a bus. But a virtual tour could be done real quick and show students where they could go later. So maybe it's outside the technical capability or budget, but that's a possibility. I very much, I know that Civil War days this year, it's obviously complicated again, but I'm going to say that I've been to Civil War days, and I've seen, there's a shirt for sale that said, if this flag offends you, you don't know history. And it's a Confederate flag. That sends a mixed and confusing message to students when it is clear that the cause of the Civil War was slavery. And that isn't the Southern flag, that's the battle flag. So I'm not saying anything in a reenactment. Of course, in a reenactment, you might have symbols like a Confederate flag, but I'm not saying what people choose in their own lives. They have freedom of speech. But as a part of a historical celebration and learning about the Civil War, I don't like seeing the Confederate flag for sale on our property. And maybe it's a consideration. We have to consider what the rules are for that. But if you want to send students to learn what the cause of Civil War, and you never even learned that they ended slavery, then you didn't learn anything. You learned what type of uniforms they had. That's not the point. That's a part of it, though. Uniforms are definitely a part. That's why I like that our Historical Society brought in a Harriet Tubman reenactor. She did an amazing job. And that teaches students that. So I'm not criticizing what we've done, because I think we are doing a good job at it, but we can improve it and clarify and review if the flag as a symbol or on the battlefield, or is it sold as something you buy while you're there, which is something I dislike. But maybe the the committee will give us some feedback and research it and think about it.
Chair, if I could, just to make,
Yes.
so with those two items, the virtual tours and that, I think that is, correct me if I'm wrong, is mostly on the historical committee side, not the park district side of the event. So I think what you're requesting is that the two committee members of the park district maybe agenda, have that discussion with the committee or with the historical society at the committee meeting that they go to. Is that?
That is correct. I mean, for the virtual tours and partnership with schools, they already do partnerships with schools and they do a good job at that. So I know that's a part of their ongoing work.
So I defer to Kate and Elaine. Do you guys want to, put those on your agenda or discuss those with the
Can
committee?
I just clarify, are you saying, Brian, that you don't want the Confederate flag there?
I'm fine with it in a historical context, like there's a battle reenactment and troops walk in and they are waving their flags. That's a part of what happened. But I'm specifically mentioning there's a gift shop where you can just buy a t-shirt with the Confederate flag on it. That's not a historical item. That's not a part of a reenactment. That's not on the battlefield.
I guess because selling it is one thing that I think is part of the learning process. It's part of the program.
Yeah, Elaine, I think what Brian's saying is that when they sell their goods that go with the Civil War reenactment, that we request that they not sell items with the Confederate flag on it. And really, I don't think that's our decision. I think it's a decision of the Historical Society, I believe, because it's their event.
And then lastly for me, I'd like to propose a committee. And the committee specifically is for our community members with special needs. And what I envision for it, I know that Donna Prenta had spoken to me and Kate O'Brien about it before. What I envision for it is we would listen and we would learn, and then maybe there's something that we're missing. Maybe there's something that a community member brings to us that we wouldn't have thought of. Or maybe what we do is we find out what we already offer, and some community partnerships didn't know what we offer. So we've worked through that committee to advertise what we currently offer to them. But to do that, I believe that would be a part of it, a motion for the committees tonight, to do two things: create that committee, and then the second thing is appoint members to it.
Brian, if I could, are you talking about physical structure changes or programs or both?
Both.
Okay. And again, the answer that I think what you said before, that could go to an existing committee, say advanced planning, if it's structural, or, youth activities or what, we can create a new committee. And again, if it's one time in nature, you could create an ad hoc committee too. So just giving you your options, or the board the options on how to address that issue if it's the pleasure of the board.
Brian, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
What is the ultimate goal of that committee?
So one of the goals would be finding out what we have, basically like an inventory, and seeing what we should do next. So as an example, at Big Sky Park, the playground, I didn't notice this, but a friend of mine did. It's her favorite playground because her young son, he sometimes when she brings him to a playground, he just runs for it. But at that playground, because it happens to be a short fence, she could sit on the bench and relax as he plays. But I wouldn't have thought of that when we design a playground, like, oh, we should include a fence like that. And I'm thinking, how many more things are there like that, that maybe, I know that we follow ADA laws and regulations, but maybe there's a part of something that we're missing. Another example is we're designing the activity center. There's people with sensory issues that will not go to it if we decide to pump music all the time really loud to make it a party atmosphere. Now, I'm not saying we never have music in there, but if you don't have sensory issues, you might not realize, well, it sounds fun to some of us, but to others, it's off-putting. So I imagine that the committee would listen and make some suggestions. And if it was a part of a different committee, then we would invite people, like if Dan, as you suggest, special events or advanced planning. Then when we have an advanced planning committee meeting, we specifically reach out to the community and say, this is what we're discussing. Come to this committee meeting if you want to give input. Dan?
So if I can comment, Brian, I think everything you're suggesting in terms of what we can do is a great thing. I guess what I'm not understanding is why it requires a committee. Isn't this something that, as far as the activity center, that would be part of the planning for the activity center? As far as other parks or playgrounds, that would be something that would brought to the attention of the staff, and if it required board action, then it would come to the board. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think the things you're suggesting are all really good. I'm just unclear why that requires a committee.
It might not, and I'm open to that, but then that would mean it's a part of like the advanced planning committee that we send invites out to that meeting. Because I know that we notice the meetings, I know that they're posted online, but maybe members of the public might not realize when you're designing an activity center that they could give input on that. Or they might not realize what a committee meeting, that they're valued in that. So if we chose not to create it as a committee, which I'm open to, then I'm just going to say as a part of the motion tonight for the committees that we invite people to attend them. Now they might not come because they're busy or they don't see the need to, but maybe they'll come.
Well, I actually agree with that. Part of my objection to committees all along, in terms of the ones that actually have made recommendations in the past, is that even though they're public, they're almost like not known to the public. And so we have these committees that are supposed to be open meetings to the public, but the public doesn't really know about them. That's kind of been my problem with, I don't mind the advisory committees that, like, Strather and Oak Park, but the problem with our other standing committees is that you're having two board members make recommendations on behalf of 5, and then the public doesn't even know about these committee meetings. So my concern is that with committees, unless you're specifically inviting someone or I'm specifically inviting someone, the general public really isn't aware of them. And so they're not really serving their overall purpose.
Kate, what do you think? Do you think we should create it as a committee or put it into the work of other committees?
We're talking about the special needs. I think as an ad hoc committee, enough to sort of explore what we've got and see if what we have is sufficient. If it's not, obviously make some changes. But it sounds like something that doesn't need to be a permanent standing committee. It could be an ad hoc one. That makes any sense.
Dan, what were you thinking?
I just want to, just a little bit, and I don't mean to just education here. There's a whole process. It sounds like you're mostly talking about facilities and structures and things like that. No, it's not so much program, but there is a defined process in the law for ADA self-evaluation, and it's very strict, and it's a legal process to which, and when the Americans with Disabilities Act came in, every agency was supposed to go through their building. So there is a very defined process that you're supposed to go through for ADA compliance. That being said, it sounds like you're talking a little bit about that. It sounds like you're talking about a little bit about future projects. So I think I would need, we need to talk about the scope of the committee too, because it's a very large scope. Are we talking about existing facilities and retrofitting? Are we talking about designing things into facilities moving forward? So I just throw that out for thought. My main point, though, is there is a very defined self-evaluation ADA legal process regarding ADA that we have to think about as we have these discussions. And then once these items are identified, just quite frankly, you have to follow through on doing them. So we got to, relative to, there's a fiscal impact to that as well. So just informational items as we talk about this issue.
Elaine, what do you think?
Well, I actually think on an ad hoc basis, if we have a project, or actually I was thinking too about engaging these people in conversations, because I don't know what we don't know. I mean, even though we're in compliant with ADA, maybe there's some things that we just are not aware of that make people with certain handicaps more difficult to enjoy our park. So maybe on an ad hoc, or have a committee of community people with that interest.
So Dan, could the direction be like this? Yes, Ed?
I had a question. Is, the idea is to get the people who are interested and concerned involved. Wouldn't this make more sense at some point with a report and with information, almost as a discussion item on the agenda, and part of a board meeting where everybody knows about the meetings, and then the interested people can show up and give their input?
It's the more I hear about this, the more it seems like it should be an actual agenda item with public input and a staff report.
And what are your thoughts on that? Is that even more confusing, or is that less confusing?
I think that works. I think what we're grappling with is, like I said, is the scope and exactly, what the goal is. And I think if we had a staff report with some information, and so we could kind of define what the policy direction is and setting that, then we could move forward with an ad hoc or a committee, or, move forward from that point. At that point, we could bring in the constituency that's interested in that. I will say, I just want, it's a slippery slope when you're, there's financial costs and those things involved, and that's fine. We can do that just as a warning, but ad hoc, I would, based on the discussion, it sounds like a board discussion that kind of scoped this out in a little bit more detailed with some information from Wayne and I on, what we do, what we could do, that kind of thing, and what the scope is. Sorry to just thinking out loud.
Right. So with Dan's answer to that, what I would say is this, Brian, I don't want to do anything to thwart this effort, because I think what you're trying to do is the correct thing. So I'm in terms of whether we have a committee or ad hoc committee, I'll do whatever the right thing is. I'm just asking questions because I think the issues you're bringing up are important, and I think input from those concerned and involved is important. So I'm not saying no because I don't want to thwart the effort. I just want to make sure we do it in the right way, and I don't know what the answer to that is.
So I think what I'm going to propose is we create an ad hoc committee that's not a permanent committee. So we will have a few meetings, and at those meetings, listening to the members of the public that this is a specific issue to them. Maybe we'll come up with a board agenda item with an action item that we would vote on. Or maybe at those committee meetings, I'm not sure what we might learn. Maybe we'll learn that what is possible and what they propose we already are doing, and then there's no agenda item. So I'm going to propose that we have it as a committee, that we invite people to meet. The two members of the committee will work with staff to invite people, and then we'll listen with the understanding of everything that's proposed we can't afford. Just like any group, when we have foundation meetings with talking about soccer fields, we don't ask them to come up with all the fields they'd ever want, because we can't afford that either. But we'll find out what are their priorities, and maybe we'll make it an agenda item. Maybe at the next meeting that we do, we won't renew the committee. Like there won't be a need, but maybe there will. So
I would agree with you. I'd like to hear what they have to say.
If I could ask the attorney, I saw you popped up. Brian, under this item, can we create an ad hoc committee this evening?
Well, Dan, I don't recall what your policies say about creating an ad hoc committee, but I would say that under this agenda item, there's no reference to creating new committees. The reference is to approving the attached Board of Directors standing committee list, and that would include the committees that are on the list and the proposed assignments. So
Brian, if I
So
could,
put it on the next agenda so we can address it as soon as possible.
in the narrative, just a minute, in the narrative of the report, it says part of the consideration of this item, the board could also choose to add, remove, or change committees as desired.
In paragraph
Brian?
Yeah, I'm looking at that. Okay, are these all standing committees, Dan?
And liaison.
Are called standing and liaison committees.
All right, well, I think that language is probably broad enough to allow you to have a ad hoc committee appointed. Is that what you're doing? Are you creating, what are you creating a committee? You appointing people to a committee? What's happening here?
Suggesting-
So go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, he's suggesting both.
Okay, so, and Dan, do you happen to recall what the district policies are on?
I think it's silent on ad hocs, actually. I can check.
I'll change that to liaison committee and just say that it's a liaison to the community of people with special needs. And we could clearly create that type of committee.
Well,
I'm good.
I think that Dan's point is well taken, that the language that's in the narrative is broad enough to give you flexibility. If you wanted to appoint an ad hoc committee today, you could, or not.
Or a liaison committee. So he's saying we have the either choice. The difference with an ad hoc is it's known to have a fixed time frame to it. A liaison, theoretically, I mean, we can do either. But theoretically, if we create a liaison committee, it's going to be created on this list until we remove it. An ad hoc committee it's a specific issue with a fixed time period tied to it. That's the difference.
Yes, I understand.
No, I'm
But the
just
way-
explaining that to the board because Brian
Right.
suggested we create it as a liaison committee and not an ad hoc. And the attorney's explaining that we can do it either way. And the definition of the two is liaison is longstanding and ongoing, and an ad hoc is short-term and topic specific.
Does it have to have a finite time though? Can it be until it completes its business? For an ad hoc?
Right.
The answer is yes.
It
depends on how you create the ad hoc committee. So if you say that the ad hoc committee's got a specific assignment to study whatever the topic might be, and to report back following the completion of that is sufficient in terms of, it doesn't have to say within 6 months, for example.
So that's what I would suggest. Without
Right.
having
An ad hoc does not have to be Brown acted, I understand, correct?
That's right. It's only, it has to be, there has to be a Brown Act, meaning that an agenda gets posted and all the other things that go along with the Brown Act. If it's got a fixed schedule and that it's an ongoing committee that is not limited as to time.
I'm listening
Sorry,
to
Brian, just to
what
clarify.
Elaine said earlier, and what you said is you wanted to listen, and I agree. That's why I don't want to do it as a board meeting, because board meetings, usually board members talk a long time, and I'd rather listen. So I'm gonna say a liaison committee with the understanding that next year we'll revisit. If the work is done, we'll just remove it from the list.
All right.
And then
I'm good with that.
And as a part of that, 2 members of it, I would like to be a member of it. And Kate, I know that you had spoken to someone before about it. Would you join me in it? Would you
I
be
do have
interested?
to be a member of that.
Are we required to get public comment on the committees?
That's
You're
what
not required to, but you can. I have a question, Dan. The liaison committees, those are standing committees also, right?
Yeah.
there's a mix in there, Brian.
So
Some
some-
of them are just liaisons to outside agencies. Some of them are committees, so I wouldn't, it's titled liaison, but I would say there's a mix of responsibilities and what those are. It's mostly us having a relationship with outside entities. It's
But are
not
they-
tied to, we don't do the committee meetings ourselves or the liaison meetings ourselves, so to speak. So on there's like CARPD, which is the part, the Capri Association.
Really, within, based on that definition, this would be more of an ad hoc committee then.
Yeah, that is right. That it would be an ad hoc, it wouldn't be a liaison committee.
Right.
It'd be an ad hoc committee. So you can go
Right.
ahead and proceed, given the scope of the description in the agenda. If you wanted to create an ad hoc committee and assign folks to it, understanding that it's going to be limited in duration and not have a fixed meeting schedule.
And then as a part of that, Kelly, Danielle, or Laura, I have a question for you. I'm saying people with special needs. Is there a better term that we should call that? Like, are we good with that name, or is there a better term that's more inclusive or proper?
You've heard the word special needs as well as like therapeutic. That's used pretty much everywhere I've heard in this valley, but special needs is something you can use. That is not a term that, or a label, or an incorrect label, I should say.
Okay. Then I'm going to make a motion that we adopt this proposed committee's assignments with the addition of a committee for meeting the needs of people with special needs with myself and Kate on that committee.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion about the committees?
I didn't hear you use the word ad hoc in that motion. Maybe you did, but
I would like to a motion to approve the committee assignments and committees with the creation of an ad hoc committee for people with special needs. That would include myself and Kate on it.
right. And then that committee is going to be of limited duration and is to return back to the board with the results of their review at some time, in the near
And we'll
future.
say, the limited duration for now, 1 year.
But that's fine.
And Brian, your motion also needs to, the film committee, I think we agreed to educate Josh, and then if he wants to bring that back as an idea and a future item, so that doesn't need to be in the motion because we're just taking that as staff direction at this point, and Josh can to move forward.
And then just one other thing, again, not as far as being a committee, but that I have requested the district manager to look into the possibility of having a board member or 2 board members as part of the director of recreation interview process.
And you would bring that back to us as possibly an agenda item or discussion item?
That, or depending on what's concluded, yes, I would say either as a agenda item or at a minimum board member comments. Hopefully agenda item, because hopefully Dan likes the idea, but one or the some sort of report back before the process actually begins.
So I got director of recreation, filming, and then the ad hoc committee for special needs. Okay.
Do we need a roll call vote, or could we just do a vote?
I think my advice is you do a roll call.
Gina, will you call the roll?
Director Abela,
Aye.
Director Freeman, Director Freeman, Director Gray,
Aye.
Vice Chair O'Brien,
Yes.
and Chair Dennert.
Yes. That brings us to written communications of note, but before we do that, I propose we take a 5-minute break. If anyone needs to get a drink of water or anything. So we'll come back at 9:28. Seeing that it is 9:28, calling the meeting back to order. We're at written communications of note. Before I call on board members, Dan, do you have any written communications of note?
Staff does not.
Any other board members have a written communication of note? I had one email, a woman asked about our drone policy. I called her back the same day, but by the time I talked to her, she said she already researched it for a couple hours. And I said I would find out more about that. So I'm not saying that we need to discuss that tonight or even in a near board meeting, but I think we should discuss it in the context of how people could be good neighbors. She was saying that there's an issue with the drone at her local park, but also at the same time encourage people to get out in nature and have fun. Coincidentally, the exact same day at the same park that she called about, I found a drone. So I'll leave it at the front desk, but somebody lost their drone at that same park. That's it for written communications and note for me.
Mr. Pierrick and I have done a little legal search on that very issue, so I can pull that up and at least inform you on what we.
Okay, and then I'll determine if there should be an agenda item to encourage people to do it, but in a positive way. Reports by board members. Josh?
Sure, thank you. So I actually have a query for Dan when he has a moment. In December, I unfortunately wasn't able to bring this up because I was concerned with resolving it, but I did hear from members of the community in regards to PSPS and thanking us for the role we played in opening the community center when individuals didn't have power in parts of the community due to the high winds. And I was curious, what is the district's role in PSPS events, specifically in that occurred in November and December of 2020?
So it's actually kind of a formal process, but the city, Edison is required to have what they call a community resource center. And the city has that role right now, and they've designated the senior center as the community resource center for the community. And in fact, they've signed a contract with the city for the use of the senior center and those types of things. That being said, and the events that happened in December, I received a call from the city manager that they found out Edison was going to turn off the power to the community resource center. So I think it was a kind of a last minute thing where the city manager asked us to step in and provide an alternate location as a backup to the senior center. Well, I don't know if it's ironic, but we did that, and then Edison proceeded to shut off the power to the community center, the one we had set up as well. So I guess my response is it's primarily a city responsibility, only because they have offered the facility at this point. To the extent that we want to partner with the city in that, we can do that, but we do have a designated area. I would just note too that our facilities at these events are fluid in nature, and we get short notice. And many of our buildings are being used for programs and such. So in the case of the center itself, it is the designated evacuation site for a large American Red Cross type event or need. And we would cancel the programs and offer that, but the electrical shutoff events does impact people in our buildings who may be doing programs. So just a little background on our role right now. We are a backup to the city. City's the primary, but if the board chooses, we could offer more locations for PSPS if the board would like, in addition to what the city's doing.
It's also my understanding that there's a contract with Edison and the city, and that Edison is, by that contract, Edison is supposed to be, in the event of an emergency, is supposed to be subsidizing the city and our area with facilities. Is that correct?
I understand it. Edison is supposed to, I don't know the particular, it's a PUC regulation. Edison is supposed to staff those facilities and also, make everything available and operate those facilities. In the particular case with the senior center, it's my knowledge that they're also supposed to provide a generator at the senior center in the event that what happened did. It's my understanding that Edison is not completely fulfilling their obligations under whatever regulatory agency. And I know for a fact that they've not shown up in town and they're not staffing the facilities that they're supposed to be at on occasion.
Yeah, I think
the public out in the lurch a bit.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely, I'm supportive of the district. I want to be a good neighbor, and I think the district should do that. I think we should be supportive whenever possible. I think I do have a concern when another third party has an agreement and is failing to meet it, and then we are being put in a position that we want to provide the fire hose, but we're also then exposing staff to COVID in a situation where it's a third party's decision-making process that resulted in community difficulties. So in light of this one instance, I'd be curious if the board would have, I don't know how far I can go with this, the board would have interest in a discussion on pressuring Edison to fulfill its duties to the city and to the community, and therefore that we're also fulfilling our duties of being a good neighbor, but it's clearly a requirement on another entity to fulfill that in this instance. And our staff has been put at risk because of their failings.
If it's a pleasure of the board, I mean, you can request an agenda item, but I would put something on the next agenda that would be something of, write a letter or, reach out to our legislators or whatever it may be on the next agenda if you would like to do that.
I think I'd be most interested in a letter, but I'm also interested in any other opinions, any other thoughts people have on how to do this. I understand it's a city responsibility, but it does concern me, and I want the district to be supportive, and I want great partnerships with the city and the schools and our neighboring areas. But it does concern me that, I've talked about my concern for staff.
So again, yeah, you can put an agenda item on, in this environment, we can kind of get a temperature if your board members are interested in that discussion or open to the idea of discussing it.
So you could propose an agenda item, and one of the possibilities is a letter, and you could propose other possibilities, and then at the next meeting we could discuss them.
Then I'll propose an agenda item, and I will. And follow-up question for my own information there. Should I develop a letter in question or an idea of a place?
Staff will do that for you, yeah.
Okay.
But probably, because I don't know where we don't know the full board stands on this, we'll bring back a discussion, and then out of the next meeting, I'll ask the board for direction on drafting a letter that meets what the board desires out of the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Josh, anything more for your board report?
No, I've been quarantined, so I haven't had the pleasure of walking our trails or enjoying our parks. Yeah, that's it for my board report.
Kate? Kate, you're on mute. Kate, we can't hear you.
Okay, got it. Quarantine, yeah, there's not a whole lot going on. I just had the Historical Society Zoom with Director Freeman. We talked about repairing the adobe roof and the wall, and when are we going to open up again? We don't know. And I just want to say Happy New Year, everyone. Let's hope 2021 is a better year than 2020. And that's my report.
Elaine?
I had the historical meeting with Director O'Brien, and she mentioned the items. Other than that, I didn't have any other meetings, but again, I want to wish Tracy the best.
Ed?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to say, I do try to get out to the parks. They're looking great. Wayne, again, so far, the situation at Rancho Santa Susana, as far as the path, is much improved. So I realize there still may be times when it gets muddy there, but it's certainly what they've done has improved the situation. And compared to what it was like, I'll take anything I get. So it's really appreciated from your staff out there that they've done that. The other things I was going to mention basically came up during the meeting. I don't think she's on the meeting anymore, but I was going to let Tracy know one more time how awesome she is. It's not even midnight in Texas yet, so I don't know how she's off duty already. But really will miss Tracy. So that's what I've got.
I had a meeting with the Trailblazers, and out of that meeting, we discussed ideas for promoting hiking, including the possibility of staff doing a short talk or finding people to do a short talk before a hike. So imagine there's a short talk at Corriganville about the history from one of our staff members or a volunteer in the community that knows, but not too long because people want to go for a hike. The Trailblazers are not currently organizing hikes as a group, but I know they're still hiking because I think it was the very next day I saw one of them cleaning up trash at Las Yajas. So they had their badge and a trash bag and a stick for picking up trash. So they're an amazing community group. They have a Facebook group that anyone's welcome to join. And if you join their group, people post trails and ask for suggestions. So if you have knowledge of that, or just want to comment on a post and thank people, or just post pictures, you'll find that people will literally take your suggestion the next day, go for a hike. So we're all welcome to join that. We have our Martin Luther King Day event coming up. And if you have not signed up yet, you sign up on the district's website for one of the events. And I do like that quote, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And I'm going to remind or share with people, if you didn't realize it, Martin Luther King gave the I Have a Dream speech in 1963. He died in 1968. There was a lot of work in those 5 years. That wasn't the end of his work. So as we prepare for the event, if you want to do any reading about what he was doing for others, he was doing a lot of work. He set a challenging example and a message for us to live up to. Dan, NRPA, the magazine, do we regularly share that with staff, or like Josh is new to the board, does he get a subscription? How's that work? The reason I mention is there's a lot of good ideas in there, and sometimes I get old magazines, I really enjoy them.
Yeah, I've got a stack of them that I would be happy to give Josh if he wants to get caught up. And then I can also, we are a member of the agency. I don't know how many magazines we get, but we can certainly add his address to the list if he'd like.
Yeah, add our address and his address and any other board member that requested.
I would imagine that our membership comes with a certain number of magazines.
Okay.
We can either, share them around here or send them directly to you if possible.
Old magazines work too. If you just put them in our mailbox, or when you get our board reports. And lastly, I've had some communications with different groups that are signing our contracts for our fields. I shared with them that we could bring back, if they were not able to use it, a possible partial refund or discount. I told them I was only one board member, and I told them that I don't know what the possibility is because we have a budget too. But I know that a lot of our
revenue's down to 0.5 too, so yeah.
Yeah. And I did share with them that the relief funds are generally not for special districts. Elaine updated us on that, but some of the relief funds are for businesses or cities or states. But special districts, obviously, we have a budget too. That's it for me for board reports. That brings us to report by district manager.
Thank you, Chair and Board. I've had a contact with a gentleman who has a 5-acre piece of property up near Mount McCoy that happens to have a city water tank on it, but he's interested in donating that to us. There's not a whole lot of benefit to us at this point, but we're still in discussions. I will be meeting with the Historical Society. There's evolution and staff and cost sharing and those things. I think it was on their agenda, but Wayne and I are planning on meeting with them at a staff level first to talk about kind of the status of staffing at the Historical Society and who pays for what and what folks are doing certain tasks out there. So I am, as you mentioned it, I'm working as part of under the auspices of the Ventura County Special Districts on a county coronavirus work group, we're calling it. And the purpose of it is to work with the county to get a share of any federal or state fee or funds that might be available for special districts. We're doing training on our new community outreach and marketing plan. So we're rolling out training in a couple of weeks. We'll still move forward with that and get everybody up to speed on the expectations for increasing our promotions and marketing across the district. I did want to note that although it was modified, I think our holiday festivities went fairly well. I want to thank the folks that put time into that and organized that, Teresa and Tracy and a number of other folks. We did the decorations out front, and we had our drawing that we normally have at our event over a period of days. We had a couple employees dress up as Santa and an elf, John Dodson and Casey. So they were running around doing that. And then we had the board members contribute to gifts to our employees as a part of the drawing. So all in all, despite not being able to have our usual holiday event, I think it was well received, and I want to thank both the staff that put that together and also the board for supporting and participating in that. I did want to let the board know, and you may be aware that Metrolink's doing a double tracking project near the station in town. It's actually an $86 million project. Wayne and I are going to be meeting on that. Our interest is in how that impacts our our Arroyo Simi trail complex, or our vision, and how if that impedes or changes in any way our vision for the Arroyo Simi around that. The chamber, just so you know, the chamber donated us a bunch of masks over the holiday, N95 masks. So that was nice of them. I did send a thank you letter to them on behalf of the Park District for doing that. It's already been mentioned, but the Rotary is planning an April 2nd COVID-friendly concert, Queen Nation. They haven't pulled their permit yet, but we're going to be working on that. And as I understand it, they're eyeing a similar series the same weekend that they have done the Cajun Festival. They might try to do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday over Memorial Day weekend. The hitch there in this point is, the stay-at-home order and whether or not we can do that. But hopefully by that time, April 2nd will be well beyond a stay-at-home order, and we'll be able to do those outdoor events. And then just a reminder, the Oak Park Committee election is going on. We're taking nominations now. January 21st board meeting, we have 2 Boy Scouts we're going to recognize. We will bring back actually a couple items tonight that were brought up. Will probably end up on the January 21st agenda. ASC and golf fees will either be on the 21st or the first meeting in February. And so that's what we're looking at for the next couple of meetings. We do have an Oak Park Committee meeting on January 14th, a week from today. Their first meeting of the year. Outside of our normal update items, we are going to have the item they requested a discussion about how we're managing the trees and the environment over there. If you recall, that was brought up at our board meeting last time. That'll be on the agenda. The item of getting input on youth members serving on the committee in one form or another will be discussed, and their meeting calendar for next year will be on their agenda along with the regular items. And with that concludes my report.
Dan, at the Oak Park Committee meeting, would they also discuss the progress on the lagoon?
Yes, we have a fire update. We do that. That's become a regular thing, is to update them on our projects out there. So yes. Yep.
I have a question. We mentioned the concerts being done. Are we normally I'd be asking Tracy this, but are we doing any planning for a potential concert in the park series this summer?
We're planning on our normal series this summer. Yep. Our normal. Yep. Yes, we're planning to have our normal concert series.
Who's in charge of that right now?
It's going to be Laura. I don't know how up to speed she is on it, but her and Danielle will both be the actings. Oh, that's what I meant. Her and Danielle. So Danielle and Laura will be sharing acting duties over the next 8 weeks or whatever amount of time. They're going to split the responsibilities. Laura is the acting director for the first 7 or 8 weeks, and Danielle will do the second 7 or 8 weeks. So that falls into Laura's lap at this point.
Oh yeah. Can I act, or am I allowed to actually work?
Yeah, it's true. You got to fake being director. No, we want you to do the real thing.
Yeah.
Danielle as well.
And I do directly oversee that event with support from the director.
Where are we in the planning process for this summer? It's this summer's concerts.
Our plan is to continue with the normal dates, which is usually the 3rd Saturday of June, July, and August. And due to funding, we're literally just postponed. So we will be using the same bands that were scheduled for the last series.
And Dan, I had a question. The Oak Park meeting, will that also be on Zoom and recorded?
We are not recording those meetings now. I mean, it'll be recorded on tape. I don't know if we can record the Zoom. We haven't, we normally record the Oak Park meetings via tape. We haven't had any plan to, we haven't discussed recording the Zoom meetings or anything like that.
I'm not requesting that we talk about the budget and asking somebody to record it and put it together professionally like we do for our board meetings. But Zoom has an option where you just hit record. And that means we can just record it if someone missed it. Bottom right, just the red button.
Yeah, we never, I won't say that now. We just create expectations and more service levels and more stuff when we're adding things. So we just need to be aware of that and more staff time and all of those things. So
Ed, bless you. And then I believe that brings us to closed session.
I don't believe we have any closed session, do we? We do not have any closed session items, no.
That brings us to adjournment. I now adjourn the meeting of the Rancho Simi Recreation and Park District. We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Good night.
Night.
Take care.
Good night.